Well, good.
Greg, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I don't know how far back we go for having been muted, but I'll start all over again. We've got a great lineup for you this afternoon. I think my elbow hit the mute button here. Great lineup for you this afternoon. We understand that you have other obligations from time to time, and so some people will be joining, others will be leaving and then coming back. I think we've learned how to do these Zoom meetings over the last 14 months by now. As unfortunate they are, I'm glad we have it to retain our connectivity. We will have our first presentation here just momentarily, followed by the post-COVID construction scene. A lead consultant at Hastech is going to be sharing with us his perspective on that. And then a very fine panel on the emerging landscape for construction. That'll be about 1:15. Take a short break around 2, and then using innovation and collaboration to define and redefine the capital projects model. Pete's going to be here with us on that. And then we'll have a presentation on internal lean leadership by Anne-Marie Thornquist with Jacobs, and then recap the afternoon. If at any time throughout the meeting you have any questions, please use the chat box to share your questions. When it's obviously time to ask for questions, then we could even invite you to activate your microphone. While you're seated, if you can activate your cameras and it's appropriate to do so, we encourage you to do that. It will give us a little bit more sense of your presence at this meeting, and we'd ask you that you do us that favor. If you need anything at all, Rana, along with Greg Palmer, will be able to meet your needs. You can email them, you can chat with them privately, etc., and they can answer your questions as we go along. We're going to have a good time together, and it's going to be a valuable insight. And I want to start right now. Greg Palmer, if you'll pull up the slide deck, I'm going to give you an update on the CURT CII Alliance. Now, many of you may have heard about it. Some of you have read about it in ENR, and some of you have participated in it. But about June of last year, we got a call from CII, which is the Construction Industry Institute out of Austin, Texas, who suggested an alliance. At that time, it was a 3-way alliance, along with a group called ECC, who sponsors a conference, and that we work more closely together, more collaboratively together, and for a greater output. The purpose of that really was that as travel budgets become restricted, as people become less discretionary with their time to spend with us, we felt it was going to be tough for the industry to respond to, at that time, 3 major organizational initiatives: 4 CURT meetings a year, a national conference, a CII annual event, their committee meetings, their research teams. It's a lot for one company who might be members of both to support that kind of very rigorous travel. So we begin to explore what an alliance might look like. And as we begin to explore what an alliance might look like, it became clear that the ECC organization, while having been around 54 years and delivering a lot of good content with their conference, it just wasn't a fit with where we felt an alliance needed to go with CII and CURT. So they willingly just sat down and said, hey, we'll be back when you guys figure this out, so to speak. And in September of last year, we began aggressively, CURT and CII, to exploring what an alliance looked like. Next slide, please, Greg. Okay, and
there's a note there for you. You have to call.
Let's go on to the next one. So why are we exploring the Industry Alliance? Here are a few things that we feel a collaborative would provide the industry, the respective members, and frankly, the quality of the output. Number one, we are thinking in terms of deployment. One of the challenges that CII has had, and CURT for that matter as well, has been to do a lot of research and then come up with a report out on a case study or a finding or an owner blueprint or a CII research result at a conference. And then it becomes a very challenging process to try to pick that up and implement that in our respective companies. People were finding it difficult. The learning curve was steep, and it just wasn't getting done. It's not getting done today as we feel that it should. Greg, could you mute everybody except me, please? The next one is what we were trying to do here is both consistent with the CURT mission and consistent with the CII mission. And that is to improve the industry, and that is to bring more cost effectiveness to our construction projects. Lastly, we want a better turn on investment. You know, there's a fee to joining these things because you have to provide the infrastructure for the development of what we do, for the service of what we provide, for these seminars, summits, connects, and CII for what they do with the University of Texas. And we began to explore what were the synergistic strengths between CURT and CII, and how could they complement each other, and therefore reduce the amount of budget and reduce the amount of volunteer time that may be required from each organization. So there were all kinds of reasons to explore this. Now, you need to know that the pandemic was not a driver. It wasn't the reason for this. This had actually been talked about as early as 2018, I think it was. So for the last 24 to 30 months, we had talked about something just like this. But the pandemic was an opportunity, a catalyst, if you will, to explore what we're trying to do. Next slide, please. So think of this alliance. We've all been on airlines, and you likely have been on Delta. And so think of this in terms of an airline alliance. You know, the airline industry's concept was we want to be able to take you anywhere, but none of us individually can take you everywhere. And so the Star Alliance, the Sky Team Alliance, etc., group of airlines that come together that customer facing are seamless in their deployment, but they can indeed take you everywhere using their equipment, each other's equipment, sharing registration and reservation information, etc. Likewise, the CURT CII vision is to become the hub, and the other organizations that we're very closely associated with would become the spokes. In other words, they would be referred to as alliance partners. And so during this season of our organizational life, last fall and this spring, we've been putting together a framework for a CURT CII hub, I don't want to say controlling alliance because it sends the wrong word, but it is the alliance upon which the constellation of other organizations revolve. Once that has been solidified, we'll reach out to other organizations, some of them you see there, to also participate. The industry is way bigger than CURT and CII. We need every organization, contractor organizations, local user councils, CII global affiliates, NCCER, obviously a big player in this space, the Lean Construction Institute, and all of them you see there. Those will be alliance partners wrapping themselves and feeding off the CURT CII anticipated alliance. Next slide, please, Greg. So here's where we are. In the spring of this year, we decided that we wanted to, we being myself and Stephen Mulvin, Groves and Jenny Bienna and Dago Macheski, their chair, Jim Ellis, our chair, we needed to reach out and get some idea generation going. So we convened 7 work teams in 7 major areas of the initiatives. And those involved operations, governance, finances and dues, events and conferences, market research that leads to academic research, and academic research that leads to deployment. And so these several different teams had members of both CII and CURT. It had staff from both CII and CURT, and they spent a few weeks exploring their particular area of interest, the ones that I mentioned a moment ago. Shortly ago, we asked for an 80% report. In other words, we'll never get to 100% of the recommendations, but we asked for an 80% of the report. And so we got their input, and one of the key areas that we feel were breakthrough areas for this alliance is that we were going to agree to look to the marketplace as well as internally to our various organizations. What does that mean? For a long time, the way CII selected topics was the members would come together and they were well informed and they would share various aspects of challenges in their business that they felt we needed to have research on. If there was a critical mass, if there was some momentum for that idea, it typically got selected to be researched and then was put in a 3-year academic research cycle that had private sector and membership involvement as well. But it became a little onerous and frankly, a little incestuous. The difference with how we've been doing selecting topics and how we intend to select topics is putting a lot more emphasis on what the market intelligence tells us. In addition, not instead of or in lieu of, but in addition to the CURT and CII members' input, what does the marketplace need and want? What are they clamoring for? And then taking that input and also sending it up to CII for research. And then there's the other aspect as well. How do you get what they find beyond case studies at meetings such as these or in conferences or seminars or webinars? How do you do it? And so we get to the productization and commercialization, if you will, of products and services, which will be a part of the deployment of the research findings. That is brand new as well. What does that mean? That means reports, it means seminars, it means events, it means consultants, it means resources, it means subject matter experts who help take the research, put it into bite-size, edible form so that the industry, and most particularly our members, can use it with ease and use it more quickly than it's ever been used, and not just be left with a 3-inch binder of a report or some materials, a PowerPoint on a case study, and asked to go implement it in their companies. Huge, major difference. Huge impact on CURT. So obviously the CII group will continue to do the research. So you've got 2 components primarily, is market-driven research, and you've got deployment, which involves productization and services, commercialization, etc. That will be primarily CURT's responsibility. It's a new way of moving for us. It's an additional service that we'll offer to our members in the industry. Next slide, please. The organizational structure will retain both organizations, so it's not a merger, it's not an acquisition, it's not a new company, it's not a hostile takeover. The parent organizations here reflected in the blue, CII, and us in the pink on the right-hand side, will have an advisory team. Now, this is subject to change, but I'm giving you an up-to-the-minute report of where we are as of last week. We'll have an alliance advisory team, equal number of members of CURT and CII. The heads of the 2 organizations will serve as co-chairs, and they will oversee a contractual relationship between the 2 organizations and who's providing what. So, what's the governance document? We've got 2 staffs. How do they work? What new organizational responsibilities will they assume? What organizational responsibilities will they offload? And who's going to manage this market research project and determine the alliance portfolio of research, if you will. And then also we're looking at tweaking the budgets and the dues of both organizations, eliminating waste, eliminating redundancy, driving efficiency, driving productivity organizationally, but having yet enough dollars to do that. The big win for CURT in this, and by the way, our attitude about this has been it must be a win-win-win. What does that mean? That means CURT wins. It means CII wins. It means the members win, and it means the industry wins. If there is one loser in that scenario and in our narrative, then we go back to the drawing board and figure it out, because it's one industry with multiple voices, and there has to be a win for everybody. It's not a negotiation where one person loses in the deal and the other wins. I think it's very important to state that. So there will likely be a dues adjustment upward. You know, for the last 3 years, CURT has put our dues increase, which was planned back in the mid-teens, 2015, I think, on ice for obvious reasons. We didn't want to deal with that during COVID, obviously, and whatnot. And we still are sustained by other organizations.
With a barcode facing up.
Greg, can you mute everyone, please?
Please pay the amount shown. If paying with chip-enabled card, please.
Thank you. So this is the proposed organizational structure subject to change. Next slide, please. So what do we do with committees? Well, there's a lot of overlap there. And what we're looking at currently, again, all subject to change. Please emphasize proposed. So we've looked at our committees, and we looked at their communities of practice, and we looked at the various sectors. So down the y-axis on the left in the purple, you see a sector, and your company fits in one of those. We've brought about every kind of company we can think of to the forefront and said, what sector would they fit in? And then along the x-axis, or you can see it here in the blue along the top, we have what you know as committees and what they know as communities of practice. A couple of changes is that we want this to be an international initiative from the get-go. So we will likely integrate an international component in each of those communities or committees at the top. And we will also do the same thing with technology. We may go back and revisit the technology committee. Instead of just integrating it as a through thread to all of this, it may end up being a standalone. A lot of uncertainty, frankly, along that area, but a very hot area of the business in terms of improving productivity, improving safety. It's just everywhere, and we need to be upon it. The question is, does it need to be inculcated as an integral part to the joint committees, or does it need its own standalone presence? To be determined. The CII Board of Advisors would begin to mesh and go away. And we'll obviously, we don't have a Board of Advisors, we have a Board of Directors, which, as you saw in the previous slide, would be retained for our own organization. What would the committees work on? Well, for the first time ever, and by the way, CII is over 40 years old. CURT this year is 20 years old. I take that back. They're approaching 40 years old. They're right around that area. I may have misstated, but they're about twice as old as we are. But the safety, the workforce, the lean, the project excellence, all these things, we feel we can get a better result if we integrate them toward a specific area of work, a specific output, a product, a service, a finding, a development, a resource. We don't know yet. So I hesitated in how much to share because some of the answers are still, we don't know. This is a progress report based on last week's progress. And this is where we are to date. But the committees, we want them to be more productive, more meaningful. We want them to be mission friendly to the Alliance and mission friendly to each organization. We want them to do something and create, inform, or provide a resource. So the committees will take on a more robust life, if you will, than perhaps we know now. More to come on that. Next slide, please, Greg. So these are just, I won't take the time to go over these individually, but this of course is our SWOT analysis. And internally, what are the strengths that our organizations have and opportunities, threats, and weaknesses? You see the opportunity is quite large. The strength is robust. The threats, I think, are manageable, and the weaknesses, I think, we can overcome as well. Things like, meshing the culture and dealing with the distance of the two staffs, and just the transitions to and what staffing, what additional we may need to be an effective deployment arm for the Alliance findings. Next slide, please, Greg. This is a timeline, an implementation timeline. It's hard to read this slide. By the way, I think these slides will be in your Dropbox if Ron is saying yes, so you can peruse them on your own. And if you have any questions, give us a call. Next slide, please, Greg. So what are the path forward? We're taking it slowly and deliberately. We're getting CII executive endorsement, which is complete. The Board of Advisors executive endorsement, which is complete. We need to work with the University of Texas because CII is a state affiliated institution. So therefore it's part of the University of Texas system at Austin and therefore part of the state of Texas. A little bit more challenging. Our CURT Board of Directors has met once. They're going to be meeting here in the very near future again, giving them a chance to soak in the developments, to ask the right questions, to get some answers, to formulate some responses, etc. And then the final approval we want to be in August, sometime in the last half of the year. So we're being deliberate, we're being circumspect, we're being intentional with what we're doing, we're being inclusive. By the way, we've got CURT staff as well as CURT members who were on those teams. And so we wanted everybody to, to be a part, to have input on this initiative. We don't see any major change in your current role or what should I say, involvement this year. We're going to ramp up and launch. As I said, we are adamant that this be a win-win, win for CI, win for CURT, and of course its members. So this is where we are. This is where we've been spending a lot of time. This is also a 10,000-foot overview. There is much detail. I think the original slide deck here had 27 slides. So there's a detail under each of these. So I saw Rana say that these will be made available to you, emailed or in the packet. And I encourage you to look at them. If you have some questions, call. I've already had one call yesterday afternoon from one of our members just asking about it. And it's totally fine. We want it to be of service to you. The big boon from us is if this goes according to plan, CURT will now have access to a lot of the CII materials that have hitherto been exclusively for their members. And what that accessibility looks like and what that availability looks like yet to be determined, but CII has been very generous and very intentional in its desire to share with us their attic and their basement, if you will, over the last 40 years. So that will be a huge value add to the CURT member organization as well. I'm going to try to stay on schedule as closely as we can, which means we have 3 minutes for the rest of it. Next slide, please, Greg. I think we're finished actually with this slide deck. And we're going to refrain from any specific questions because I don't see a lot of them. And we, in the interest of getting some of the other things done, we'll get this email, this PowerPoint slide set out to you. You can look at it, call and ask questions of any of the parties that you want. But I believe it's going to be a fantastic opportunity for CURT to add value not only to its members, but to do a better job of servicing the industry. In the few moments that we have left, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel Groves for a comment about the safety benchmarking portal and the survey. Daniel, what do you need from us?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone that it's that time of year to begin participation in the safety benchmarking process that CURT has been doing for a lot of years. So that's underway right now. We've already we've already received, getting close to 500 million hours. Our ideal every year is a minimum of 3.5 billion. You may recall hours, that is. You may recall that we do this in collaboration with CII. And so if there's, I've sent emails out, I think CII has sent emails out. So all that information may be in your inbox, but if in fact it is not, simply go to our website, CURT.org, go over to the resources tab at the top, click on safety benchmarking portal, and then everything you need is in there. The instructions for how to sign up if you want to do it yourself online. There's also a user guide. And then there's also a template, an Excel template, which you can just dump all the data into and send it over to me. And it only takes a minute or two. So I'd be happy to put it in for you so we can take all that pressure off of you. You may remember that we don't ask for anything unusual in that. In fact, most of the time it's data you're already submitting and tracking anyway. So it's just a matter of putting it in there. And then it allows us to do some great benchmarking among all of our members, which we then share back with you, and then it creates the opportunity to drive improvement. So thanks for an opportunity to note that. We highly, highly, highly value your engagement in doing this and strongly encourage you to do that. If you have any questions, give me a shout, give me an email, whatever it may be, or go to the website and it's all there as well.
Great, Daniel. Thank you very much. I'll also draw your attention to our CURT event dates. And Rana, I'm going to ask you, if you would, to tell the audience here where they can find information about CURT events and CURT dates. Just a word or two from you, Rana, if you wouldn't mind.
Hi, everyone. Yes, you can find all of our events at curtevents.com. This is a new website. If you have any questions at all about it, let me know. And also, if you go to the site that you're used to going to, the CURT.org, you can look for the tab at the very top that says events. Click on that, and that will take you right to the event page. If you have any questions as far as registration, just let us know. We're here to help you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Rana. And we do have room still in our Safety Summit. That's going to be held tomorrow. And there's still some space left. If you're last minute, if your calendar opened up last minute and you'd like to join, or someone from your organization, Rana will make sure she gets you registered. And by the way, she handed me this color-coded list. These are the CURT events. What you're experiencing right now is not the crux of it. We've got CURT Connects, we've got webinars, we've got teaching opportunities, learning opportunities. There's all sorts of things that are coming up. So as you can see from just this brief color-coded event sheet that we keep here in the office, there's a ton that's available for you. Keep in mind that CURT's a corporate membership. So it's not just you, it's all the people in your organization that you would like to plug into CURT. We would certainly welcome them. Rana can help you get them registered and provide a download of events that are available to you and that you and your team may find valuable. I want to transition now. And oh, and by the way, just before we do leave, CURT committees have met regularly throughout the course of the spring. I don't even think they're on events, but if you're in a committee, you'll continue to meet. We will have our first face-to-face event in August in Florida with CII at the CII CURT joint conference. We'll be having our own events and awards again in November. We'll be having a standalone event, I think, here in Cincinnati, a special event sometime in late September, early October, and of course, an abundance of internet-based events that you can plug into. So we look very forward to getting back to shaking your hand, sharing a drink, and just seeing you face to face. This has worked okay and well, I guess, under the circumstances, but we will not stay under the circumstances. We will soon be on top of the circumstances and back together once again in just weeks. So continue to be prudent in your taking care of yourself and each other with masking and vaxxing and all that is available to us. And we are speeding forward and can't wait until we meet you here in a few short weeks. Our first presentation for this afternoon is called Preparing for the Post-COVID Construction Surge. Now we've got Eric Charlebois that's going to be our special presenter. The data about Eric and this presentation, I think, is also in the Dropbox that you can access. If you have trouble with that, call Rana or Palmer or email them. But at this time, I'm going to mute my mic and turn it over to Eric. Eric, thanks for your help on this. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Welcome.
No problem. Thank you so much, Greg, for the introduction. I hope everybody can see my screen. It's preparing for the post-COVID construction surge. Can everybody see it? Sounds good. So, folks, what we're going to talk about just briefly is about that post-COVID surge, and what it deals with construction. More or less, how does it going to impact some of your organizations? So, brief kind of overview, what we're talking about here is the pandemic. What are we going to deal with in that post-pandemic? An unexpected, sharp 10-year downward trend. There was a lot of things that happened all at once, right around this time last year. Unemployment rates, plummeted. We were looking at a skyrocketed unemployment rate as of March last year of 14.7%. Right now in 2021, we're looking at an unemployment rate of 6% as of March 2021. To kind of give you a perspective, going into the pandemic, that right before the cusp of the pandemic, we were at a historic low for unemployment. We were about 4.4% of unemployment rate. Now we're about 1 year after it, right? We're talking about our post-COVID. Over this course of this past year, construction is kind of slowed down. It kind of went at a turtle's pace. If you're looking at the turtle and the hare race, going into January of 2020, it was looking like it was going to be another record year for construction. Facilities were doing a lot of work where they were expanding, and then COVID all just snarled it down. Over the last couple months, we've kind of seen that ray of sunshine. U.S. vaccinations as of today are about 31.8%, and that's a climbing rate. Over 44.4% of the population has received one shot. The CDC is significantly relaxing guidelines for mask use, travel, social distancing. For those who have been vaccinated, travel restrictions are being lifted, and the economy is driving out of the impacts of COVID. As the construction industry heats back up and projects go to the field, where does that impact look like, or what does that impact look like in regards to the workplace safety? The analytics, if we're looking at the analytics from Dodge Data and Analytics in Hamilton, New Jersey, reports 2020 total construction activities fell an estimated 14%. That's about $738 billion. For comparison, pre-COVID 2020 projections expected construction to just 4%. Construct Connect in Cincinnati estimated a 2020 loss of about 18.8%, which comes out to about $672 billion. This year, both forecasts predict some overall economic improvements. Dodge experts expects total construction activities to gain about $771 billion. As a comparison, Construct Connect projects gains of $747 billion. They're very similar. If you guys can understand what we were talking about in 2020 versus now, their numbers are very, very similar. While the recovery is underway, the road to recovery will be long and fraught with potential potholes. Richard Branch, chief economist for Dodge. In short, Dodge forecast 2021 show residential construction increase by about 5%. And if you're in the market for a house right now, it's a bear market out there. They would like to see those numbers go a little bit higher, but they're not increasing due to the supply, the raw materials that are out there. They're also gaining that about 3% of non-building construction, and then with other sectors, they're looking at a 7.2 or non-residential 14%, and civil non-building growth about 13.5%. As you can see, the market cycles. We were in the cycle already. We were already starting to go towards a cycle. The pandemic kind of adjusted that timeline. There's no general way to categorize labor shortages in construction. The field hires a range of workers. They hire carpenters, electricians, steel and iron, welders, fabricators, project managers, supervisors, equipment operators, and a lot more that are out there. Even with one category, labor varies for heavy equipment operators. For example, the skill set for a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility project, which requires a painstaking smooth grading, calls for a greater skill than somebody that's building a shopping center project. Due to higher price tags of job candidates, don't fully fit the needs of the projects, require some grooming and training. There's a big shift in seasoned employees to other organizations. Along with that, ABC Construction, they're calling that about $1 billion in extra spending creates about 5,700 jobs. The forecast analyzed during the COVID pandemic, 430 more construction workers still need to be hired in 2021 to meet the demand. Where is that workforce going to come from? Can the skilled trades pool, can the unions cover that much work? When we're talking about these skilled trades, we're talking about the workers, they're competing against the warehouse work. As a couple of years ago, I was talking to one of my clients. They run a wastewater treatment plant, and it's a municipal wastewater treatment plant. And we were having this conversation about getting skilled workers in there. And this is all pre-pandemic, but it kind of paints a picture for you. And he was giving me the struggles of getting a skilled workforce in there, and having to do extra training. And I asked him what was his biggest challenge. He said, Eric, as you were driving in here, did you drive past all those warehouses that were along the same road to walk into the wastewater treatment plant? I said, yes. He said, did you see all the signs that were on top of those buildings? I said, yeah, I did. Eric, I can't compete with a warehouse that is paying $3 more an hour to work in an air-conditioned environment versus a skilled trade that we need as as a society. A wastewater treatment plant is kind of one of those forgotten things that we look at and we deal with, but it kind of shows where we're going. In the early 1980s, the Business Roundtable predicted that a shortage of skilled craft workers would hamper the growth of both open shop and union construction sectors. By the 1980s, be more specific, 1983, the prediction was confirmed by the 1996 Business Roundtable study that found that 60% of its surveyed members were experiencing a shortage of skilled craft workers. 75% of those respondents indicated a shortage had worsened in 5 years prior to the study. The shortage of craft workers apparently has further worsened in recent years. In 2001, the same Construction Roundtable, CURT, conducted a survey in which 82% of its respondents reported a shortage. And it was, in addition, 78% of those same respondents indicated it had worsened in 3 years prior to the study. In 2007, the number had risen to 86%. Higher skilled trades in construction, i.e. electricians and pipe fitters, are experiencing greater shortages in comparison to low skilled trades. Laborers and roofers, Electricians, pipe fitters, welders, boiler makers, millwrights, and iron workers are among those skilled crafts, which the greatest demands among the construction industry trade in the US. Two reasons for the long-term shortage are a lack of training and the inability to attract that new talent. There are also reasons for short-term shortages, such as an increasing demand within the workforce and the retirement of the baby boomer generation of the workers born between 1946 and 1965. Now, here's a statistic that I think that we should know, that about 10 years ago, our skilled labor force, our construction workforce, the average age of a construction worker was the mid-40s. That was 10 years ago. As we get, as the workforce ages, we're having an issue with bringing in these skilled trades. We're having an issue bringing in individuals that want to do the work, that want to, do that hard labor. It's becoming harder and harder. My mother is a retired school teacher from Illinois, and we've had several discussions about skilled trades. When I grew up in Illinois, Indiana, we went through various different types of trades. I went through a program called building trades, where you were required to do a certain number of wood shop before you can join the building trades. And when I say building trades, our school district bought a property, and from there we built a house from scratch, from foundation all the way up to the finished woodwork. At the end of the project, there was actually a waiting list and a lottery just to be able to bid on the project. And the reason why was that when we were building this house, it was built to every single code. And when you bought that house, you were getting a perfect house. That project or that program that I was part of growing up is no longer there. And it's a lot of people are pushing to trades to go to college, or for people to go to college. I'm a big proponent of higher education, but I don't think higher education is for everybody. There are individuals that go to the military. There are individuals that do construction work. We all need to work together, and we all need to have those different trades together. So what should you expect from the workforce that's coming out? There's a brand new industrial construction. I'm not going back to food service. I'm not going back to the entertainment industry. There's a lot of people that are saying that I'm just not going to do it again. I'm not going to be laid off. I'm not going to be, put in a position that this pandemic put us into. So where's that vacuum going? Where's everybody going is they're going to the construction trades. Because if you see that during the entire pandemic, the construction industry was referred to as the essential workforce. And people are starting to realize that construction is a viable trade. And the people that normally wouldn't have been doing construction are now doing construction. We also have a higher increase in English as a second language for some of the workforce. Some individuals have been out of work for several years. More younger workers may have a higher risk of tolerance and behaviors. So I jokingly say, and please don't take this as offensive, that in my industry in safety, I've been doing this for 15 plus years. I run an adult daycare. And when I say I run an adult daycare, it's all in joking fun, because when I'm dealing with the younger workforce, they are, that younger workforce doesn't have the experience, doesn't have the knowledge, hasn't seen those accidents or those incidents that, us seasoned individuals, when I say seasoned, some of us have the gray beards, have dealt with and some of the challenges that we have encountered. So they haven't experienced it yet, but they're also coming in. These newer generations are coming in with the mind frame that they know it all. I'd probably admit that I was probably one of those individuals one day. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have our aging industry. We have our aging workforce. With the aging workforce, it's a little harder for them to do the work, the harder trades of work. They might have cut a corner here and there throughout the course of their their latter years of construction. And it's trying to deal with that. So how do some organizations deal with this? How do some organizations avoid those pitfalls and do that quality control, before those construction teams get on their project sites? Some of the methods that have helped out, and some of you might already be doing now with your projects, is a lower foreman to worker ratio, where back in the day you could have one foreman that could watch 10 or 15 workers. Now, because you're dealing with such a diverse background, you might want to lower your foreman to worker ratios. Commit to a more time to that safety orientation and that training. So when they're coming out to your project sites and they're coming out to your facilities to do work, put together a safety orientation. Talk about the pitfalls and those safety hazards that are at your facilities. Do more training for your facility engineers. Do more training for those project managers, those project engineers. Lower that HSE staff to worker ratio and verify that workers have been safely trained. As a trainer myself, I pride myself on the information I give to the people that I'm training. I haven't been in this role all my career. I was, previously a regional safety manager, and I dealt with different subcontractors. And, I would see countless paperwork come across my desk saying that our workers have been trained in fall protection, our workers have been trained in confined space, or they've been trained in excavations. But then when you get the boots on the ground, you start asking those probing questions. What is a proper anchor point for fall protection? How many pounds should that anchor point? And they can't even tell you. And then they're being listed and have gone through training saying that they've been through competent fall protection training. This all impacts you guys on your facilities, because if you do have a major accident, you do have a major incident, that slows down the time, right? Verify the competencies of that HSE staff. He was a foreman and he has OSHA 30, so we made him our safety rep. Well, OSHA 30 is a great awareness class that OSHA has put together, but it's not all encompassing. There's a lot more that comes into the safety. There's a lot of hands-on training techniques that are involved. The visual demonstrations, mock-ups, examples of the right way, multi-language signage. So, the pictogram signs are a great way that you can help with that second language, English as a second language construction crew. Offer English classes to those workers. If you're offering English classes to some of your workers, that helps you out in the long run. There's a thing called a hierarchy of controls. With the hierarchy of controls, it's a way of eliminating the hazards associated with, some of these construction sites and some of these projects. When you're offering, English as a class to some of your workers, that's a way that you can, engineer out some of those hazards. Because if somebody can speak to somebody in the same language, they can voice their concerns. They can, have suggestions, right? And safety reminders. Do those toolbox talks multiple times per day sometimes. It's always a great idea to do a toolbox talk in the morning to talk about, a common hazard that's on your project sites, but also look at doing them multiple times a day. After lunch, as a friendly reminder, here in Maryland, it's supposed to get in the upper 80s today. And, doing a toolbox talk of remember to hydrate, where in the morning, we might have talked about fall protection or trenching or shoring. There's a lot of different methods. There's a lot of different organizations out there that can help, but as construction projects keep growing and as construction projects keep evolving, we're going to have those different challenges. What I said earlier, it's a cyclic rate. We are probably a couple of years too soon into that cyclic rate, and it was probably driven by the COVID. So there might be a lot more pitfalls that are being uncovered in the next year when it deals with construction. I appreciate everybody's time, and I open up to questions or comments or concerns.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate that. Lots of good information in those quick slides. It has been our experience in the past that some of the best information also comes with this kind of interaction we're about to launch right now for a few minutes. And so when you talk about preparing for the construction surge, what are some of the others seeing in terms of, is there a surge, and what are you seeing with respect to the shortage? Are there any creative approaches to it? Now, if you'd like to participate, we're just going to have something called open mic. You don't have to type anything to the chat. Activate your microphone. You'll be recognized, and we'll get a conversation going here. Who's first?
Hello?
Yeah, go right
Good.
ahead, Bill. Thanks. Good to see you.
Yeah, this is Bill Lewis, and I have actually not been in the field for quite a few years, and recently on this project, I spent some time in the module yard, and I am now spending some time in the field here in the U.S. Watching these modules be assembled. But I'm amazed at how much equipment that is required nowadays, and I think you mentioned. Eric mentioned, the amount of safety talks and actual meetings that we have with the craft to ensure that they understand, what they're doing, the project, their JSAs is complete. And, but I'm actually amazed at how much equipment these guys have to carry nowadays. It's significantly different from what I've seen in the past.
To what do you think that's to their or to the project's detriment, Bill? So if that's a fact, and I believe you're absolutely correct, what kind of impact do you think that has on productivity, safety, the project, the person?
Well, we talk about AWP, and I remember some of the old data. They talked about, time on tools. 37% was a number that was commonly quoted, and they said through AWP and just better planning process, we could get 60% time on tools. And as I walk through the field and I watch people and stuff, I struggle that if you don't have a really good resilient planning process to believe that we're getting 60% time on tools. I think the productivity and then just all the review meetings and the time we spend trying to keep people prepared and keeping them safe. I question that 60% time on tools, and I don't know if anybody else sees it that way. I've been away for a while, so I see a big change in time, and I actually have spent some time in Asia. And the way we work in the United States now, I don't think I could use that same process in Asia. I would not be able to get people, especially the amount that these guys are carrying when they put their harnesses on, the double retractable lanyards, all the masking, all the PPE. It's a significant amount of weight. It kind of reminds me when I was in the military carrying all my gear. Is anybody else, do you see that as a positive or negative to productivity?
Yeah, that's a great point, Bill. So the question is, what are some of the others of you seeing in terms of productivity as it relates to the gear, the equipment, et cetera, in the field? Any other comments on that? Eric, you want to respond to it at all? Are you seeing what Bill described there?
Yeah, so actually I am seeing a lot of that to the point of what Bill was talking about. I actually had in my previous life infrastructure. We did bridge construction, and most of my workers had to wear what's called double retractables on their harnesses. We were having a big problem when we transitioned over to those double retractables. They do have some weight to them, and they were actually pulling their D-rings back down to their lower back. And if you're familiar with fall protection, that's a huge issue. So we actually had to go back to our manufacturer, redesign our harnesses to accompany or to facilitate these new types of retractables. They're adding 15, sometimes 10 to 15 pounds, all their tool bags, so on and so forth. There are some industries out there right now that are actually looking at exoskeletons for workers. There are some systems out there that can be attached onto scissor lifts that actually could take a rivet gun that is typically 25, 30 pounds and turn it into 1 to 3 pounds. So it's spinning off to Bill's point. It is spinning off to other industries.
Anybody else have any comments or questions about these things?
Greg, I did want to bring up one last
Yeah,
thing
go
that I
go
forgot
right
to bring
ahead.
up during the slides. There are some organizations out there, larger organizations, that are kind of finding their contractors and finding those contractors that are fitting all their requirements, that are doing everything that they need to do. They're safe, they're productive, and guess what? They're paying them a little extra money to keep those crews together and move on to their next facility. So that's another way that, other organizations are losing out on that skilled labor force. It's predominantly found in, the petrochemical and some of the pharmaceutical companies are, as they're building these new facilities, they're taking the same crews with them across the country and sometimes across the world.
What kind of extra training have you guys found? Sorry, I'm using the Midwest guys. My apologies, ladies. What kind of extra resources or new resources have you found cropping up around the country? This is an open-ended question for any of you that help retain the workers that you have. Are there other creative approaches to compensation, to quality of life in the field? Is there anything else that's new? I know we're seeing a lot of modularization and pre-assembly. Al, it looks like you're going to weigh in. Go right ahead, my friend.
Yeah, I was gonna say modularization and pre-assembly. A lot of that is actually, I think, working to help. I mean, one of the things that you mentioned, having to compete with that worker that's working in an air-conditioned space. If you can take the work out of the unfabricated space and put it into a controlled working environment so that that worker is always traveling to the same spot, to the same place, and is there working job from job to job to job in the same in those same locations, it's much easier to retain the higher quality craft laborer in doing that. And I think that that's what you're starting to see in with modularization, and also the lean approach is you invest a lot in the entirety of your project team. That's the craft worker all the way up to the supervision and superintendents, and moving those teams from project to project as you continue to do that becomes an investment in the skill set. And you start to see, I mean, we've gotten some craft laborers that have, they've changed over in jobs and maybe moved around, but they're working repeatedly from job to job and have been at our sites for years on doing that. So I think that as you start to both take modular approach and a lean approach and start recognizing the investment that you're putting into the labor force, that's not just your own individual company's labor force, but your partner's labor force, and start looking at a larger pool and caring about those people, you're going to see dividends paid in productivity, in the quality of work, and the safety performance across the board in every aspect.
Thank you, Al. Merck has, as one example, because of the pandemic, whose construction or capital projects portfolio, I understand from March, has just blown up. And I mean, just a lot of new work with existing capacity. How are you guys dealing with that, Al?
as best we can.
Like D-Day, right? Just get there.
Some of it is due to the pandemic. Yes, we do have some programs that are out there, like many of the pharmaceutical companies. We took it as an imperative to do support the nation and the world in trying to fight this pandemic that's going on. And we've got lots of different things that are oars in the water trying to battle it. But it's not just that, it's the whole explosion in technology. And about 5 years ago, I was reading an article that basically said, there's going to be more discovery in the next 10 years in the pharmaceutical industry than there has been in the previous 100 combined. And you're seeing that with mRNA vaccines and with, all of the other things that are going on between therapeutic proteins and other stuff like that. And all of that requires investment. So that's just the headwinds that we're fighting, and all across the pharmaceutical industry, there's an extraordinary amount of investment in what's going on. So finding these skilled craft workers and moving them from job to job is an imperative.
Thanks for your input on that. Any other questions or comments?
Rob
Yeah,
Wagner.
hi, Rob. Procter
Since
&
I'm on the
Gamble.
lean committee, too, I can't let Al do all the talking. No. I agree with everything that Al said, and America's a phenomenal company. P&G, what we recently did, as I did it as a check base for COVID, just to see, and I used ISN, and they did a health survey for me. We had over 150 craft and foremen, which don't work for P&G, reply to the survey, which is huge. When I only did it across my 6 sites, so that's a huge number of people percentage-wise. The ISN was surprised, but the good news is they came back, and the results were that they felt that we, P&G, had done a phenomenal job in keeping their safety and their health in mind, truly treating them as an industrial partner, not a contractor. And that for me, weighed heavy on my heart, because it was like, I know we're doing the right thing, and it's recognized by the craft in the field that they're like, yeah, you guys are doing everything you can to make it safe for us, and we appreciate that. And I thought that was a fairly nice pat on the back, shall we say? But it goes back to everything that Al said: is maintaining the resources, training them, keeping them safe, safety up, and all of that. So it's a way of measuring it as well. That's all I want to say. Is it's a health check on our organization, and the good news is we got a good bill of health.
Well, that's great, Rob, and congratulations to you on that. A quick question for the gang. So, we've often heard these things touted as being almost softy, like, let's call them industrial partners. Let's not refer to them as contractors. Let's be sensitive and let them know that it matters. But what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, in addition to the commentary here, is that those kinds of efforts are mission critical to the ongoing of the business. They're no longer just nice, sweet things to do for the men and women in the field. These are becoming strategies, if you will, tactics, certainly, as a part of the strategy to keep your people happy and coming to work at your site. What other kinds of, I hate to use it as the term as a soft touch, but I don't know what else to call it, except that it's a personal expression of our caring that they are a part of our team. What else, in addition to just bothering to survey, like Rob said, what else are we doing to convey to them that their health and welfare matters, and because it matters to Merck or Procter & Gamble or Duke, it matters to them? Any thoughts on that at all?
We're Captain's choice.
Any comments on that at all? Are there any other?
So Greg, I'll jump in real
right
quick.
ahead.
There's a book I've read that I think really drives into this, and coincidentally, the name of the book is called Drive by Daniel Pink. And basically what the premise of that, and you can find some TED Talks and some other things along those lines, but it's what you need to do to motivate your workers and motivate your team is really, it's not about money, although money helps, but generally speaking, once you cover the basic needs on the money, it's not going to motivate you that much more on there. But it's mastery, autonomy, and purpose. If you can allow a person to master a skill or master their own skill set and help foster that, and that's providing training, providing the safety, and doing all of those other types of things on there to help develop them. And the union's got it right here. This is one of the places where I say it. They work on developing their people on that. And then autonomy, letting them have a say and on when they need to go, how they're going to do their work, what's going to be doing that. And that's actively getting them involved. You know, some of the programs that you see in safety with JSAs and other things like that, pushing those to the craft workers, getting them involved in those types of things. Those let them have some autonomy in what they're trying to do. And then finally, purpose, connecting them with a purpose higher than themselves. You know, for Merck, it's easy. I mean, you know, we're about, you know, solving the COVID crisis and saving your neighbor, your child, or, you know, with Gardasil, which is one of our biggest program. We're looking to cure cancer and eliminate cancer in 25% of women, you know, on there, and even, you know, many cancers in men. So there's you know, having something that allows you to connect everybody on your team to something bigger than just I'm riveting something in, or I'm, you know, connecting the steel, or just erecting steel, or you know, mudding the drywall, you know, or, you know, bricklayers. I'm building a cathedral. I'm not laying brick.
Yeah.
Connecting to a bigger purpose. And I think that, you know, the CURT industries as a whole can really connect to a greater purpose.
You know, I really appreciate what you said there, Alan. I've asked Rana what she has done to put that in the chat. The Merck's approach and outlook on field worker development is mastery, autonomy, and purpose. The book was Drive by Daniel Pink, I believe was his name. There's another book that I think, Rana, let's see if we can make available to these participants. It's an updated version called The People Profit Connection by our good friend Brent Darnell. I think that's recently out. Many of you have heard Brent Darnell speak at these events before, but his book called The People Profit Connection will also give you additional insight on how we can make our contractors feel like truly industrial partners, and their team as a part of our team with caring. And I think that's part of the shortage, the worker shortage solution, is to create these teams that are endeared to you and your industry and your company. Simple things like they cared enough to ask, as Procter & Gamble's Rob just pointed out here shortly ago. Great conversation. Any additional comments or questions of Eric or of any of those who have spoken up? Okay.
Hey, Greg?
Yeah, go right ahead, Bill.
Yeah, this is Bill Lewis again. I just,
Sure.
one of the things I have observed is, you know, I see now a lot of our EPCs and our construction companies is the craft voice in construction.
Mm.
And we seem to be doing a lot better job that I remember of actually talking to the craft and listening to what they say and you know, what their concerns are, and you know, developing, you know, a good trust relationship with them. I think that's been very helpful, especially for maintaining your people from project to project.
And I think, Bill, that probably goes to craft and office and superintendency and your people, et cetera. It's not just craft specific. I think what Al said before, and I'd like to know a little bit more about where he has dug deep to get that those concepts that they're using at Merck on mastery, autonomy, and purpose, and creating that esprit de corps that's often so lacking here. Great stuff. So Rana's put those resources in there. We'll see, Rana, if you'll take an AR to see if we can get everybody here a complimentary copy of Darnell's book, Brent Darnell, and let's also check out the Daniel Pink resource that Rob mentioned, or that Al mentioned, okay? Okay. All right. We're going to thank you very much, Eric. And again, contact information for these folks. You've got all kinds of resources here. And these 4 hours are just, or 3 hours, whatever we have now, are just designed to give you three things. And this is all we've ever touted that we can have: our resources, our perspectives, and our experiences. And you've heard each of those expressed in this first presentation. Resources, what do we know? What do we have? What can we share? What have we learned? Where have we gotten it? Where do we go? What are your resources? Can you share them with a greater CURT audience? Our perspectives, what you think will happen, what you know, what your company's research has told, and in your own experiences. It's just utterly invaluable. And if you'd like to huddle with a smaller group of people at CURT or to link up, call Rana. I know I'm calling out Rana a lot this afternoon, but that's what she does day in and day out here, and she does a grand job of it. So use the resources that we have to resource not only yourself, but also your people. So next on our agenda, and I'm excited about this one because I get to MC it, is a presentation. It's not really a presentation, it's a discussion, a facilitated discussion entitled The Emerging Landscape for Construction. And this is a panel that has in it Steve Sander. I've known Stephen forever. Good to see you, Stephen. Looks like you're back in the office. Thank you for agreeing to join us today. Steve's well-respected, highly respected industry leader as the president of Associated General Contractors of America, AGC. We've all heard of it. And that leader is with us today. I'm so honored. And then we have Mark Benequisto. He's the executive director of the First Trust at United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners. Mark, why don't you wave at us and be recognized? There you are. I saw the logos a moment ago. We have Amy Marks, who's head of industrialized construction strategies at Autodesk. We've had Amy here with us before. Amy, good to see you. And then, of course, you've already heard from our own Bill Lewis, who's the chief engineer in charge of construction at Sabic Corporation, the Saudi Arabian company that is just massively huge and depends a lot on Bill Lewis to make things happen. So let me get us started. This is an open discussion. And what we're going to do is spend some time kvetching and sharing and debating and giving inputs, et cetera, with our panelists. And toward the end, as you've just heard us do, we'll open it up to you and you can ask them some questions of your own. So let's get started. Bill, I'm going to start with you. In the last 18 to 24 months, and I know you've been in Asia and now you're back in the United States, and so you're our quintessential owner, world traveler. But in the last 12 to 18 months, what was the most dramatic change that you have seen transpire in our industry from your perspective? And what do you think might have been driving that? Bill? You're muted, my friend. I made that mistake also.
Sorry. I guess there's two things that come to my mind, quickly. And one is I've seen a huge owner interest in becoming more capital competitive and interest in things like offsite construction, modularization, lean, and new technology. I think we're finally starting to, and maybe it's because of survival, we're starting to see owners, really look at better ways and of becoming more capital cost effective. But probably the biggest impact in the last few years is understand how to manage projects through a global pandemic. And we all deal with EPCs, our engineering and our vendors and suppliers are all over the world. And when this pandemic first started, we found out that different parts of the country or the world, actually some countries completely shut down. And we was not able to get our material. We were not able to get our equipment. And so we had to deal with each one of them a little bit different. And that took a lot of work from our logistics and procurement people in expediting, a lot of extra work, had to go virtually for a lot of things. And that was hard to adjust to. We couldn't have any more face-to-face meetings. We were all virtual. Of course, I know everybody here is really experiencing that. And it made it a little bit more difficult to get engineering deliverables to the module yards, to the fab shops, to the sites, and also getting equipment there. Now, what we found out is the other thing side of it was we had to look at how we manage our craft and staff to keep them safe, from the concerns of the pandemic. We had to come up with some. If we went back to our emergency response plans, we had things in there around earthquakes and typhoons and hurricanes and volcanoes, but we didn't have anything in a lot of them to deal with how we dealt with a pandemic situation. So we had to go back and kind of look at that and develop what our strategy was. And we also had to work a lot with governments and local communities because, we were shut completely down. And, the people didn't want us starting back up until we had a good strategy. So we had to write our plan and come up with documentation, had to come up with some health screening and, how do we manage people's fitness for duty and ensure that we were keeping everybody safe at the site. Additional PPE, actually moving people, this hit us, right in at the end of the Christmas, New Year holiday and Chinese New Year. And we had a lot of people dispersed throughout the world. And we found out that we wasn't able to get them back to their work locations. Visas had expired. They had shut down highways, roads, airlines had shut down. So we had to work plans to get them back into their work areas and their sites and in temporary construction facilities, the whole way that we managed the construction site, we had to provide, all of our eating and break facilities, all our meetings, conference. We had to separate everyone to try to maintain some type of social distancing. And we had to, in some areas, we had to have medical staff brought on to do health checks and monitor people, a couple times a day. We had to set up the temperature monitoring systems so everybody came in. A lot of places, before we could allow anybody back, we had to have a testing protocol and have everybody tested before we could get back. So that's probably the biggest thing that I can think of, in the last 12 to 18 months that's impacted us, but also the way owners are behaving and changing to look at some of these technologies that we've talked about for decades and had a hard time getting them to buy in. But I think one thing that became real apparent is we have to have a connection to the local communities and governments, because we needed their assistance in setting up all these protocols and getting people back to work.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate that. And once again, we'll open it up for some questions here at the end, but there's a few leading questions that we wanted to ask our experts about. My next question is going to be Mark's question. And then Mark, as you look at the supply chain, particularly labor, what's been the biggest impact to the industry and how has the organized trades responded to that? Mark?
Greg, first, thanks for having me as part of the panel. I appreciate the opportunity. From our perspective, we're most concerned about the human side of the supply chain. Our industry partners have to worry about the drywall market, chips for construction vehicles, technology, and what it means is thousands of cargo containers with parts keep falling off ships in the middle of the ocean. For us, we're focused on getting apprentices back up to speed and back on track for advancement. Due to the pandemic, our training centers have had to close, and when they could open, they face severe limitations in most places. We have a group of apprentices that went a year without regular on-site training. And as I'm sure we all agree, although we worked to do what we could virtually, it just isn't an acceptable substitute in our industry. As a side note, I will say that in addition to the impact that this has had on our apprentices, it also has had an impact on our instructors, because we haven't been able to do our train the trainer programs at our international training center in Las Vegas. In this case, however, we were able to use virtual training effectively with Zoom, GoPro cameras, master instructors, providing direction from locations all over North America. As we're gearing up to improve the supply chain of skilled apprentices, we continue to focus on bringing in new workers into the industry. This includes working hard to grow our diversity and our retention through mentorship. For human resources, there's a supply out there with women, minorities, and lots of young people that want a good career but don't want to go to college, but we need to connect to them.
What steps are you taking currently, Mark? What's maybe been some of the more creative approaches to that? You've heard, maybe if you were on here in the first hour, you heard some of our people talking about the hand wringer of just not having enough folks. And then, I was looking at, Biden's, and we're going to hear a little bit from Steve Sandher in a minute, with Biden's infrastructure spending, the billions on highways and bridges and transit and airports and seaports and water and the electrical grid and schools and universities. My God, it's mind-boggling what demand may be created should this pass. What kind of thought are you folks and your colleagues and other trades given to this right now to assure we don't have a cataclysmic crisis of a shortage?
I think all the trades are aggressively recruiting right now for what's upcoming. I mean, obviously with the administration that's in place right now, there's a big push for clean energy. We're seeing that with offshore wind. We're seeing that with onshore wind, solar. There's a lot of big projects that are coming down the line. So we're looking at older industries, petrochem, where we can transition workers from that industry to some of these newer industries as those slow up and these other ones pick up. But you're seeing that across all the trades are working hard, and they're working in closer harmony too, where they're working together to bring people in.
Sharing resources, has it changed the way that the trades are organized, or perhaps plan to be organized, or considering to be organized? You talked about sharing and collaborating perhaps more aggressively than ever. Care to weigh in on that one?
I would say to be determined, but
Yeah, okay.
but it's coming. I mean, the writing's on the wall.
Do you really think so? Okay.
I think so. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see some of these smaller unions combine with some of the others. I think you'll see them get swallowed up. They just can't survive. You know, there's some of these industries that are just they're dying. So you know, your Boilermakers and things like that, you'll see transition to other trades eventually.
Do you foresee any new trades areas? I mean, we're all familiar with the civil and the electrical and the mechanical and the plumbing, pipe fitting. Is there a possibility with new technology or some of these new initiatives, wind, solar, et cetera, that a new trade or new skill set could be developed and trained on? That's something we haven't heard of before?
Absolutely. I think as technology, you know, I think Bill Lewis talked a little bit earlier about technology. I mean, as technology evolves, there's going to be a need for a different type of craftsperson. So I think we're seeing some of it. You know, we've participated in some of that with mechatronics, which is robotic training. We have that out at our international training center. It's caught on in the auto industry. We're seeing a lot of that in the distribution side of the business, where your Amazons and Walmart, Home Depot type distribution centers, 50% of that work is robotics. They're replacing, you know, the standard person that's picking these items to robotics. So there's going to be a need for the robotics training and what we do with it. So
more to come. That's an exciting new area as well. And I'm happy to hear that our friends at the trades. And by the way, if you're fairly new to CURT, we have no preferences to labor posture. We like to say we are equal opportunity offenders. We dance with both ladies, and both ladies know it. So it's just the way that the owners roll, frankly. But I'm delighted to hear that there's at least openness to some of these new fields. And I believe you're right. I believe they'll emerge. Let's talk to Steve Sander for a minute. Steve, what do you think is the biggest threat to construction that may emerge from Capitol Hill? Now, for those of you who don't know, and I'm sure most of you do, AGC has a very strong lobbying arm, very deep tentacles all over the greater DC area in all departments, and thanks in part to Steve's fantastic leadership over the years. But what do you think's where could they really muck things up, Steve? What do we need to keep our eye on?
Well, thanks, Greg, for inviting me. My answer is probably going to differ a little bit than what how Mark might answer this. But I think the biggest threat aimed at the construction industry and the business community generally is the PRO Act, the Protect the Right to Organize Act, the AFL-CIO's wish list over the last 50 years of how they would change federal labor policy. And I say that like CURT, AGC represents both union and non-signatory contractors, and we have no, outright preference for either. It's the firm's choice. It's the construction project owner's choice, if it's a private owner, of what the labor policy should be for that project. But having said that, the PRO Act stands for Protect the Right to Organize, and that's a rather innocuous title when you consider that from AGC's perspective, as well as many others in the business community, no one is arguing with the statutory right that workers in this country have to organize, choose a union, and to bargain collectively. I would point out I could give you 20 reasons why the bill would be challenging for the business community, but let's focus on 3 that have significant impact on the construction industry. The first is this bill would allow for unlimited picketing at any time and for any reason, including picketing over jurisdictional disputes. And at the same time, the bill would eliminate the so-called 10K process, the National Labor Relations Board's administrative process for resolving jurisdictional disputes. So that's one strike. Second strike is it would permit strikes at any time and for any reason without warning. Under current law, strikes are generally prohibited unless the employer has accused of committing unfair labor practices or the parties have reached impasse in negotiating a collective bargaining agreement. This would allow strikes, as I mentioned, anytime, any reason, and without warning. So has the potential to cause serious disruptions of construction projects. And then the third strike, in our opinion, is eliminating the protections against secondary boycotts. For a union contractor, that means if a subcontractor, let's say electrical sub on a project has a dispute with the union and the union pickets that subcontractor, the general contractor has the option of creating what's known as reserve gate, reserving that only for employees of the electrical subcontractor, so it would not disrupt other employees belonging to other unions from having to walk by a picket line. Any of the electrical workers that wanted to honor the picket line would be prohibited from entering any other gate except for the one reserved for that employees of that subcontractor. So with those 3, I'd say, big ticket items, the issue and one that our union contractors fully understand is that does this create additional reasons for private owners, private project owners, to not choose union contractors because of the potential that these projects would be delayed and disrupted because of the additional economic weapons that would be given to the unions. And just to point out what a thin reed we're standing on here, the bill's already passed the House. There are 47 Democratic co-sponsors in the Senate. Chuck Schumer says if there are 50 co-sponsors, it will come to the floor. And you might ask, well, the filibuster rule is still intact, so it's not likely that they would get 60 votes. We are not counting on the filibuster rule remaining intact. There's significant pressure on the Democrat senators who have vocally supported the filibuster. So we are acting as if the filibuster rule is going to go away. And we are doing everything we can to make sure that there are not 50 co-sponsors for the bill.
What actions from Capitol Hill, Stephen, and I'm going to step away for just a moment, pass the baton to Rana. We'll be back within 60 seconds. But here's my question, Stephen. What's coming from Capitol Hill that will enhance or propel certain initiatives that would be good for our industry? And again, I'm not weighing in on the positives or negatives of the bill you just described. We'll leave that to the marketplace to decide. But what else is coming from Capitol Hill that we may not be aware of, or resources or benefits or opportunities created there that we need to know about?
Yeah, that would be a short list, Greg.
As figured.
Yeah, I mean, we are generally supportive of the infrastructure proposal. It's got robust spending increases, but I think it would be foolish for any contractor to start banking on that money actually coming to fruition. We are concerned about additional, that infrastructure bill is basically a delivery system for elements of the Green New Deal. Even though there'll be money for projects, it'll be much, take it a lot longer to be able to actually bring those projects through planning to putting a shovel in the ground. We're concerned about that. There are also requirements in the Biden infrastructure bill that would have local hire requirements. Yes, we recognize that we have a challenge finding workers, but by arbitrarily imposing a requirement that you have to hire by zip code isn't going to help us solve that problem. I think the industry needs to do a better job of getting into inner city neighborhoods and finding members of underrepresented groups and educating them on the benefits of a career in the construction crafts. I think there's a lot of work to do there. Your previous speaker talked about construction as being essential, which is the theme of a workforce development plan that we've put together and that we are getting through social media and digital advertising, getting the young people so that they recognize, even during the pandemic, construction workers were able to continue to work.
Great. Thanks, Steve. We'll be right back to you in just a second. Amy, it's always good to see you. Thank you for taking the time to join us. I want to ask you a question, if you would, please. Technology. You've heard it talked about over and over and over and over again. And I believe it's going to be one of the tools that we use to address the worker shortage and improve productivity and improve safety, performance, et cetera. But what are the new demands in and for technology that you're seeing emerge? And what are your customers clamoring for? Can you just give us a little insight into your world as it relates to technology in our industry?
Sure. I always like to use the word ecosystem because I think industry denotes one kind of organization and one type of industry. And we're really an ecosystem of lots of different industries. And I apologize, I'm on a construction site today, so you might hear a little bit of noise in the background, of course, as soon as I start talking. But I think one of the things we have to recognize is those industries have to work together as an ecosystem to deliver the built environment, right? So you're talking about convergence happening at all levels. You're seeing, industries converge, you're seeing process converge. I've, been sitting on the phone hearing them talk about, we have to, think about how we're going to design and make this, design and fabricate, move the owner up front to understand how it's going to be operated with consistency. Convergence is happening all around us. And when that happens, you see a blending of the business models, right? So you see that pressure creates a blur. And as soon as you start seeing that happen, you need to see connection through technology and process even stronger. And so what I hear people talking about all the time is, well, I have a technology to do this and a technology to do this. And there's no one ring to rule them all, right? And so I think what my vision and Autodesk vision is really as a platform company is that not only do we connect our own products within the portfolio, but that platform approach enables other bits of connective tissue technology between our products or outside of our products or underneath our products as layers to our products. And that's really important for people to recognize that there's definitely a connection that's needed. And I think the process we currently have now, the contracts we have now, the behaviors we have now, some of the technology people are using, some of the paper that we're still doing things on and where a lot of the information is living in people's heads as opposed to being able to apply machine learning and AI to it, that's got to stop. And we've got to figure out, how do we make this convergence work for us, especially with the needs of the pandemic, especially with what we've learned about ourselves, that we're able to change our behavior, that we're able to utilize technology that we thought we never could? How do we almost I say it like this at Autodesk all the time. It's like the industry that you're in or the ecosystem you participate in your industry. It's like we all are saying we need to play chess, right? Everybody knows we have to play chess. In order to play chess, we've got lack of skilled labor. We talk about we have to be more productive. You just talked about a tsunami of more complex work coming down the pike, right? And we're solving this with what? You know, it's like we have to think about all these things that are changing, and we have to stop being siloed, right? We have to stop working within a siloed ecosystem. And honestly, that's hard, because a lot of times we get paid to be in our silo and do something and get paid for something somewhat wasteful, right? So you put all this together. We've had to have connected process. We need connected workflows, and we need productization, right? So productization, not just from the physical form of prefabrication, but understanding how that prefabricated element, once it's productized, right? Not fabricated after the fact downstream. How do you productize something and then productize the workflows that are attached to it? And they are different for every product that you're thinking about in physical form. Because the issue is this: there's a few things that really happen if you're not productized and you're not digitizing that productization, and you can't elevate it to a connected platform, and really you can't optimize it. What you end up having is both digital and physical waste. And I would love to do a study, and one of the things I've kicked around is how much digital waste leads to physical waste, right? How much do we draw things that get chucked in the trash that somebody else has to draw again, that someone downstream then has to figure out how to make it, but they don't make the right thing they could have made if they were just in the process a little bit earlier, or if we could have enabled that through technology to understand that product. You know, we have 40% of what's in our landfills from construction waste. That starts with digital waste. That starts with disconnected process. And we're talking about attracting young people to this space when many of the companies that we work with, you know, again, I hear some great stories about technology and robotics and automation every day, prefabrication. You know, it's funny. Do you want to know how you get people from an inner city to get into a construction job one day? You put a factory in the inner city and they all get to work there. Or you get women that can co-locate their daycare, or you get young people that can integrate technology into their everyday life and co-locate their college courses with a factory that will be both sustainable for productization in the landfills, for the society around that factory, the economic sustainability, industry sustainability, so we can attract different people here doing different things, and environmental sustainability. We have to do this. The time is now, and we cannot use the same old process and behavior that we've had. And we all know we can change now, right? Anything is possible. So why not now? And by the way, if not now, we're sort of rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic with the tsunami of work you're talking about coming.
Wow, that blows what little hair Steve and I have back, doesn't it? My God. A great insight, Amy. A great insight, Amy. So what do you've used the word we rather about 3 times in the last 60 seconds. When you're talking we, are you talking the collective we, labor, owners, contractors? And you know, it's hard to align those 3 interests. It just is. So give us some insight on what might be the current best approach and what the low-hanging fruit is. So you're right. There's a lot coming down the pike. There's a lot that needs to be done. But like anything else, and those of us who are on this call are sophisticated in this and experienced in this area, it's a journey. What in your mind, or in the mind of you and your colleagues at Autodesk and other companies, what does that pathway look like? Where do we start? How do we start? Who are the key players? And what's the first issue you feel we need to tackle, Amy?
Definitely. I mean, look, you know, I've talked about the fact that I believe you cannot disrupt this ecosystem from the bottom up. You can definitely chip away at some pieces of it, but you have to have top-down ecosystem influencers, like the big serial owners that have the most to gain, the ones that have big geographic programs that need consistency and certainty, the ones that can work with the best of the best and are building things like digital infrastructure in hospitals and healthcare and, you know, in industrial, like you talked about. And we have to really take charge. There are some amazing serial owners that recognize they need a playbook, like we talked about at National, where they can start thinking about getting involved, removing risk, and really working with the teams to decouple process and turn it into product that can be reutilized. Again, both that physical and digital, that they can put into their playbooks, right? So that they can actually take a little bit more control. At the end of the day, you write the checks, you're in control. You can dictate any process that you want. And if anyone doesn't believe that, you're wrong. So I can tell you, when a big owner calls, when I used to be a consultant before Autodesk, and you said, we need prefabrication and you're not getting this job unless you have it, every single bidder for that called me. So like, trust me, your check is not the only thing we need. We need your influence, and we need your involvement, and we need your collaboration. I think that's who actually impacts it the most. And by the way, and then every player needs to understand their reimagined role in what the new possible looks like, right? They're going to have to let go of some wasteful things that are going to be eliminated off this planet, and they're going to have to figure out new skills. And I think, how do you get there as a transformation in a company if you're one of these groups that has to change the way you do business? You know, it's interesting. I always use the example, if you're in a factory setting, you could afford to buy a 6-axis arm robot. It doesn't mean it's going to do any good for you. You may not have the foundational skills, tools, processes, employee understanding and skill set to operate that piece of equipment. That's kind of where we are now. We all think we want to get to this place, and there are varying levels of foundational skills amongst the players that are in the ecosystem, right? They have to have a vision for what they want to do, and then they need, a strategy to understand and assess their foundational skills as a corporation today. They need to think about reuse of data, so productizing both physical and digital. And we really do need to take that and that's the hardest part. By the way, those 2 steps are the hardest part. Anyone can go buy a robot. That's easy, right? You need to be able to then digitize those processes and repeat them so you can get better at them, to take steps out of them, to connect them better with automation, right, and digitization. And then we truly need to connect them to all the stakeholders in the platform so that we can use some of what I call robots, right? You can use things like generative design, and once you've productized, you can use things like digital twins to truly understand the future of operating these spaces. You're able to get to that circularity that we're all looking for in digital and physical reuse. Your company can't keep doing things like it's the first time you've ever done it before. We have too much work, too little people, and too little skill set within the younger generation to think you're going to be able to do this like a Hollywood production every time. So you have to start with foundational skills at your company, and tools and assessments, and you then have to really move up the chain.
Do you think that the craft worker has a role in all of this as well? I mean, Mark's here representing a huge and highly influential union enterprise, but you've got the open shop that are, out there by the millions. What's the role of the craft worker in what you're throwing down?
It's a really interesting time for the craft worker. That information that they have, in sort of the aging out workforce that are working in the crafts, we need to really capture that knowledge that they have, right? And we don't have enough young people here that can be apprentices to sit next to them to get that just through osmosis and enough jobs and like we used to, right? We have to figure out, and I think a lot of them have it, many of, the organizations, that you have to take that knowledge base, you have to start working a little bit more collaboratively with each other. And we've got to figure out things like standards and productization, and how you get the information from the guys that are actually becoming the new manufacturers, where all the data lives on how to fabricate things. And we've got to move that up front by digitizing it, by understanding it, by enabling it through process. Because when those people decide to retire, look, I always say I'll be 50 this year. Like, I don't really want to be doing this for, the rest of my days. I want to be able to, take what I know and apply that to tech and improve the tech based on utilization of it. So I think there's a huge part to play. Listen, you're going to have pressure from both sides. True manufacturers that are making equipment are going to move into the bigger and bigger assemblies that are, like if you make pumps or equipment for pump skids, how hard is it to make the skid? It's much harder. They already have manufacturing process set up to make the stuff going on the skid. Lots of times they just need to integrate it on that skid. So you'll have pressure from the manufacturers into that space, and you have pressure moving up on the guys that are learning how to move past fabrication into manufacturing. And truly, that's where the information we need to move up front into design and operate is there. So they play a huge part in what's going on with the knowledge base that currently exists, unfortunately, somewhat in many people's heads and spreadsheets, but we need to really move that to tech.
Fantastic and intriguing. And I'm also delighted to hear there's a set of tools and a play box for everybody in the industry, or everybody in the ecosystem, as you prefer to say.
Yeah, I think you gotta know there's gonna be winners and losers in this. You have to know that. And so in order to identify that, you truly should start partnering with some of the bigger ecosystem players to understand where your skill set needs to go. I'm here for you.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate it. If you can mute your microphone, somebody's accidentally activated it. Greg, can we take care of that? There we go. So let me ask you all four this question. By the way, thank you so much for taking time out of what I know is a busy day for each and every one of you to be with us. But here's the question I want to ask you. Is there something you thought that CURT would ask about or I would ask about and we just didn't, and you were prepared to answer it and we just didn't get around to it? What is that for you?
Hey, I'll jump on that.
Thanks.
So, I mean, obviously, we're all well aware of the challenge that contractors have with prices and availability of construction materials.
Boy, yeah.
And, obviously, that has the potential to delay projects, has the potential to increase the cost of projects. I guess my question for the owners and the owner reps that are on the call, what is your level of flexibility and understanding of the challenge that contractors are facing? And are you meeting with your contractors to get a better understanding of what is going on in the marketplace and how it could impact timing and scheduling?
Bill, you want to take a swipe at that one?
You're on mute, Bill.
You're on mute, Bill. 10 years from now, we'll still be doing the same thing. Trust me.
Yep, on mute again.
Thank you. Go right
guess
ahead.
I would say that we've seen some successes, recently. I don't think we're doing enough, but we're starting to wake up. Maybe it's a survival mode that we're into, and we're starting to see some successes in the way we're doing business. And I think the more projects where we get into using more technology and leaning out the process and going into the modularization and offsite, I think that will help support, us driving these things. But I agree with Amy and you and Mark. We need to drive this. Owners need to drive it. And I was going to ask a question to Steve. You talk about Capitol Hill, and I think about all of our big wins in historically. And I can remember when we went from paper to 3D models, and when the internet started working, and when GPS. These were all driven by the government. What's the government?
May have frozen up there just a moment, Bill.
Oh, okay. So a lot of our wins like GPS. Internet, 3D modeling. That was a lot of these things were driven by the government. And what's Capitol Hill doing to drive these technologies and into the market? And I think we need somebody pushing the owners and these projects a little bit more. And we'll push from our end, and the more wins we have, the easier it is to push. But
right.
Is the government driving technology? Because it's obviously, and the younger people coming in, I remember when we went to 3D modeling, all of our engineers really got excited. They had this computer and being able to retain them, and their interest was renewed. And I see that now, the little bit that we're using technology, like for safety audits and quality checks, and in the field, the handheld PDAs and iPads, and I see that interest, or the younger people get excited, and I think that's one of the ways we can keep it. But what's government doing for us?
Well, I think for any contractor who is a frequent vendor for government agencies like the Corps of Engineers, NAVFAC, GSA, would probably privately argue that those agencies can't spell the term innovation, and that they are operating with a 1970s mindset in many cases, and that there are many challenges to building a federal project, and accordingly, those challenges are priced into the bid.
I mean, there are other governments besides the US that are actually doing restarts that are saying not only if you're going to restart, things need to be digitized. You need to be using things like building information modeling. You have to understand sustainability from a carbon specific, embedded carbon in the life cycle of carbon. And you need to use IC. So places like Australia and the UK, who are doing multiple $1 billion worth of initiatives that only can be built with prefabrication, and Singapore and places like that. I think after this, I'm going to Brazil for a conference today. So it's not just about the US. We have to look to other governments that have more and more constraints that are doing bigger and bigger programs to identify how they're going to get this work done. Unfortunately, we have to make sure we're doing the same in the US.
Good inputs. Anybody else have a question for our panel? We've got about 5 minutes remaining. And if you have a question, I'll just ask you to activate your microphone. Don't have to jot it down, and ask away to one of our 4 panelists. Is there anybody out there that would like to do that? Okay. Final thought. Yeah, Amy, you put the onus on the owner. You indicted the owner for what I view as lack of leadership in driving this forward, but I'm sympathetic to Bill Lewis in terms of, I'm not sure we know how to do what you've asked us to do. Something in our head and our heart resonates with your commentary, but it's like the dog's caught the car. I agree, but I don't know what to do next, say most of the owners. And oh, by the way, 48 other projects to be, it needs my attention today. So the leadership continues to flounder for what you've asked. If you were queen for the day and had the CURT organization and its influence at your service, what would you do first?
Well, first, I'm queen every day. That's what
Of course you are.
No, they call me the queen of prefab. I think secondly, I'm not indicting anyone. I'm talking tough, but I'm actually a really sweet person inside.
Oh,
And-
of course. That's why
and
we
I would
invited you
say-
back. You did
and
great
I
at the
would-
conference.
By the way, I just do tough love because I know we've got to get there quickly.
No
But
kidding.
I do think there are a lot of amazing owners out there right now that are doing a great job. A lot of them that have figured out how to understand and decouple process into their playbook, because here's what it's all about. It's about your data, right? It's about utilizing all the data from all the cool things I just heard people talk about in the last 2 hours. And how much of that do you actually know and have the ability to predict things with and create certainty around? But for connecting them, and honestly, we've started working with big owners at our convergence consulting side, which actually is out of our manufacturing team at Autodesk, to help people understand how to apply manufacturing techniques to the beginning to the end of this process, where we have real data, where we're trying to come out with certainty and cost certainty and schedule certainty over and over and over again, like we are able to do in manufacturing. And I think so there is help there, but I'll be honest with you, we need your help too, because this has been, 100 years of disconnected process.
Yeah.
And
sure.
so we need, and here's the really hard part. That it's a different workflow that needs to be productized for something that's precast than something that's MEP based. That, right? So it's almost like we have to start building a library, a digital library, one digitized book at a time, connected to all the other index books that are there. And without your help at the owner level, the biggest owners that have the most to gain, this will be impossible. And so you have to get on the journey, hopefully with us, in the sense that, we're looking to really connect all of these big tools that you're utilizing of ours. And it is already connected, and we'd like to connect it further with some of the other things that either you have proprietary wise or you're using of somebody else's. But we have to do this together. It's not like, because it's interesting. Remember what the journey was like with BIM? And there were no contracts that enabled it. There was no risk management that enabled it. There was no job title for it. We're there again, right? And the good news is we have a head start, because it's been happening, sort of in spite of us anyway, doing anything. So think about all the prefabrication we have going on right now, and productization and connected digital content. But we do have to think of it like that. You're going to have to change a lot of things as the owner in the way in which we process this work, just like you did when we got on the BIM journey.
Great comment. And I agree with you 1,000%. We'll be back in touch with you, I'm sure, in short course. And I think the Alliance can bring even greater gravitas to your proposal. Bringing both of those groups together to address this would be a phenomenal enterprise. Anybody else have any questions? We've got about 120 seconds left before we transition out. Is there another question or comment? Great.
Just one quick one for Mark. And Mark, do you think, and you're dealing with a lot of the unions and apprenticeship programs and you know, NCR, all the development for new craft. Do you think the emergence of digitalization will renew the interest?
Oh, absolutely. I think new technology is the key to drawing this younger crowd. I mean, this younger crowd's the gaming crowd. So anything with technology, and we see it, just in the Carpenters Union with some of the newer technology that's come out with, 3D scanning of projects where you get out there with the ferro lasers. I mean, these kids, they jump into that and they become experts in it, which would take a guy like me, a couple weeks to learn. They learn it in 2 or 3 days and they grasp onto it and they become experts. So, and we have a lot of success at the schools when we go in with some of the newer technology, even the virtual welders and things like that, where kids grasp onto that right away and they learn. So I definitely think that's the key.
Very good. I'm still trying to learn how to unmute my mic.
That's a very good analogy. The other thing too, some of us on the call here might recall that many years ago, CURT initiated something called the CURT Tripartite Initiative. And Mark, I don't know if you were around by then or not. You all were part of it. It was all the union general presidents, and we talked about how to make our inputs that allowed union contractors to be competitive with the others. It wasn't a pro-union thing, but what it was an effort to get rid of jurisdictional disputes. Some of these strikes that Steve talked about, the codes of excellence, the codes of conduct that came out of the electrical union was a result of that. The fact that when the carpenters decoupled from AFL-CIO, it wasn't chaos. We were a part of that at the highest level. So it could be that we need to renovate that and relaunch that kind of initiative around technology and around Amy's clarion call to unite to work on this together. I think it could absolutely revolutionize the way you guys do training, the training that you provide, and the kind of work that you then can do. It's an amazing time for that.
Absolutely. And I mean, one comment too on the PRO Act and the strikes. Remember, a lot of our CBAs, almost all of our CBAs, have a no strike clause. So that may benefit in-house unions, but as far as trade unions, you're not going to see walk-offs and things like that. Our CBAs prevent that. So
yeah, you're right. The tripartite initiative, in fact, was designed in part to prevent that kind of thing and bring the parties to the table and interface with the owners for a change, rather than going through the contractors. Contractors are at the table. That's why we called it the CURT Tripartite Initiative. We didn't exclude anyone, but for the first time in history, because the Business Roundtable certainly didn't allow it, we had union leadership interfacing with the key owners from several sectors, and it was a marvelous success. And then it did its work and we sunset it. But maybe it's time to revisit that. More to come, I suppose. I want to thank you, Amy, and I think Steve checked off, and of course you, Mark and Bill, for your commentary. We always value it, and you always have a seat at a table and a voice in the conversation. Thank you so much.
Hey, Greg, last minute question for Mark. This is Herb Strong. Hey,
yeah,
Mark.
go right ahead, Herb.
Real quick.
No worries.
Do you see a big push? And shouldn't there be a big push, almost like an evangelistic type push in our high schools, where the unions and non-union companies, but predominantly unions, I think, go into the schools, the high schools, and make a push? And I know there's going to be pushback from the administration of schools and things like that, but really a big push to get in and give talks, assembly talks, to young people, men and women, young and boys and girls, teenagers in high school, to take a look at the trade. I was talking to Greg yesterday. I'm doing that with my grandson right now, and it's either going to be a trade or military. It sounds like for him, and he's just not going to do the college thing. And a lot of kids don't want to go into college, especially today. I mean, as much as parents may want to push them in that direction, we really got to push them towards the technical schools, technical trades. Are you doing that, or do you see that in the future?
Herb, absolutely. We have a program called Career Connections. It's a 4-year program, a 4-year curriculum for the high school environment, where they go through the first year is just general trades, talks about all the trades. And then basically the second year, their sophomore year and junior year, they start picking a destination of where they want to go, whether it's pipe fitting, whether it's carpenter, whether it's millwright, welding. So we're in 17,000 high schools as of now, which during the pandemic, that obviously, put the big brakes on it, but it gave us an opportunity to go digital on all that. So now we've put that on an LMS system that the high schools can get to. So we're continuing to work it. I think the bigger picture I know NCCR, I work with Jennifer quite a bit. I don't know if Jennifer's on, but Jennifer's doing, very similar things with NCCR. And, the bigger thing is getting to the parents, convincing a parent that their kid has a future in the construction industry. I think the kids would jump on it in a heartbeat. I know my kid would. And it's convincing that parent that they have a future in the construction industry. It's a long-term future, and it's not the stigmatism of a dirty trades worker. There's actually a future. They have benefits. They have opportunities.
Are you doing? You mentioned a parent. I agree with that totally, 100%. Are you doing like assemblies or having a student parent assembly like in the evenings in schools where the parents are there?
In some markets we are. I mean, right now, I think our bigger focus is getting into the actual schools and providing the programs, talking to the school districts and getting their buy-in first. And then, we talk about it at career fairs and things like that. So, but that would be the next step is definitely getting permission from the school districts to start setting up those types of assemblies. But that definitely needs to happen.
And I assume you're tracking all that data that you're with everything and hopefully that could be shared at some point in time with the CURT membership as well. I know Eddie Clayton would be interested with workforce development for that.
Yeah, it'd be a great presentation. Excellent. Okay, thank you, Herb, and thank you, panelists. And here's what we're going to do. It's we're slightly over, and I know some of you depend on that break for phone calls and bio breaks and etc. So let's come back. Instead of it starting at 2:15, we'll start at 2:20. We'll give you enough time to refresh yourself first. I think that's equally important, and we'll have some music. Don't go anywhere. Stick around. Mute your button, and Palmer's going to tee up some tunes, and we'll see you back here at 2:20. 2:20. See you back here in a minute, gang. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. We've got about 90 minutes or so together. And during that time, we've got two terrific presentations. And by the way, those who are making the presentations, their bio data sheets are in your Dropbox. We don't take time during our actual FaceTime calls here to pardon me, I beg your pardon, to read those. And also the PowerPoint presentations, etc., you will also receive either in that Dropbox or to be sent to you immediately following our event here. I'm happy to share with you our next, or present to you our next guest, Mr. Pete DeMont, no stranger to most of you, former president of our CURT Board of Directors and currently serving as director of the Prairie Dog Initiative. As you know, this is an outgrowth of the OS2 innovation initiative that we began a few years ago. And he's going to kind of bring you an update to that and also share with you using innovation and collaboration to redefine capital projects business models. So we're talking about redefining and changing up the business model. What's new there? Pete, it's all yours, my friend. Take it away.
Hey, thanks, Greg. Audio okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, super. Slides okay?
100.
Yes?
100%.
100%. Cool. All right, good. All right, well, hey, happy to be here with everybody. I know most of y'all, and it's good to see you again. We'll go ahead and jump right in. I do want to talk a little bit today about OS2, where we are with the initiative. And it's a segue off of Greg's opening commentary around the collaboration between CII and CURT. And this is a really good manifestation of how a partnership between the two leading industry organizations can deliver some pretty cool results in the industry. I'll start out with just a reminder of everyone quickly about why we're doing this. I won't belabor the point, but we do feel compelled to work on fixing our industry. And our hypothesis was and still is that the business model of capital projects is broken and we need to fix it. We've done great work on work process improvements, on technology improvements and so on, but we project management solutions and such, but we've still have struggling companies. And again, you talk to a lot of owners like CURT members and they say my projects cost too much, and you talk to contractors and they say I'm not making any money, and unfortunately they're both right. We need to fix it. We like to study data in the industry, and just a little factoid for you. In 2020, last year, in the Dow, the US Heavy Construction Index, which is the publicly traded EPC and construction firms in the Dow, collectively did 87 billion in revenue. At Greg, since I see your beautiful face, any guess of what the net profit was for the sector in terms of percentage? What do you think the sector averaged last year in terms of percent net
Last
profit?
year, I would guess that it's down, but not down to where it's catastrophic, but I'm maybe proven wrong right here. I say
Well,
you're in the red for sure.
Negative 0.8% net profit for the sector last year. Now, it was a COVID year, we know that, but if you go back to prior years, it's still pretty low, sub 2% for sure, year on year. So we need to do something to help make our industry more sustainable on a few fronts. And one of the areas we're really focused on is transactional waste, the metric on the right. And when we talk about transactional waste, there's a lot of sources of waste in our industry. We tend to think about the field waste, work process waste. That's materials waiting on people, people waiting on materials. That's the thing lean and it kind of teaches us and so on. But there's a lot of other sources of waste. Most of them relate to the business model. They relate to late payments, duplicative insurance, a poor job of accounting and tax management practices and so on. The hierarchical supply chain is, we can largely blame for this. That creates a lot of friction and inefficiency in contractual boundaries. What is Operating System 2.0 and who's leading it? Well, let's start by trying to understand what today's business model looks like. Now, this slide is quite elementary and overly simplistic, but it's intended to be that way because today when we start a project, the level of sophistication undertaken is not that great. We conceive of some project delivery process, and there aren't that many of them, and then we marry it up to a contract type, and those have been the same contract types used since, for decades and decades and decades. So there's just not that much creativity that's made its way into capital projects business models for a long time. But when we come to OS2, we really want to try to question and challenge these things. We believe we can have a new business model that enables the execution of projects in a more collaborative way, using a community of like-minded companies that work together to ensure no one gets hurt, acting more as neighbors than as adversaries. And we want to do that because we want to deliver more predictable business results, lower risk, and more stable returns for asset developers or owners. We'll do so by reducing transactional waste, managing risk with transparency and flexibility, and generally supporting a healthier business climate for everyone involved in the project process, all the way down to the suppliers of all the pieces and the parts. Now, when we talk about nobody gets hurt, we of course mean personal safety, but we also mean in the context here of nobody gets hurt from a financial standpoint, their shareholders remain intact. We don't have poor and failing businesses. The industry isn't hurt overall. And the word neighbor is a key word, and we'll spend a little bit of time on that in a moment. I'll remind everybody this is an R&D, research and development effort. This is the marriage that we talked about a moment ago, the partnership with CII leading the research side and CURT leading the deployment side. CURT is the preferred shareholder of Prairie Dog and created the Prairie Dog business to deploy the concepts of OS2 into the market, and that is work that's already underway. The companies represented at the top are the ones that have put money into the research side of things. They're funding the research at the University of Texas. through something called an industrial affiliates program. If anyone is interested in contributing money to this great cause, you can see me or Daniel after the call. But that's not the purpose of this presentation, by the way. It's not intended to be a pitch for money or anything like that. A comparison of the business model. The model on the left is what we have today in the industry. This is the typical pyramid we experience on projects with owners at the top, hiring all the parties underneath. This is the kind of creates this layer cake supply chain where the price at the lowest level is the cost at the level above it, and it gets the markup upon markup. So when you have this inefficiency in cost structures and late payments and cost of capital and so forth, that this creates a multiplier effect because it's so hierarchical, and this is what really ultimately results in this high level of transactional waste. So we do envision a future state that's much flatter of an ecosystem, and this is a long-term goal, a destination, but it's conceptually represented on the right, and this is where we're trying to drive to with the research right now. This kind of flatter ecosystem is really this whole idea of what we've called a neighborhood. And I'll talk again a bit more about that in a moment. But the idea here is a more direct connection of the high value players in the supply chain to an integration platform, a way for companies to more directly connect into the project process without all the intermediaries and middlemen that we have in the industry right now. For this to work, it requires technology, which is really where blockchain and smart contracts come in. Blockchain is an immutable, trusted data foundation. Smart contracts to weave the relationships together. This also has a dramatic impact on risk, and would love to share with this group at a future time the incredible developments we're making in the risk management, risk modeling area of OS2. It's fascinating stuff. We're actually proving through the research now that it's a much lower risk proposition and much, much cheaper on projects to assemble a group of trusted companies in the supply chain to deliver a project than it is to go it alone with one major firm like a big EPC firm. Fascinating stuff. So what are those major transformational elements of OS2? The first one and the overarching one is this whole idea around goal congruence. How do you get all the parties to a project aligned toward a singular outcome? Now today with our delivery and contract models, we often, unfortunately, create a situation where we have different objectives because everyone has a profit objective. And the way we contract often creates friction and tension at these contractual boundaries. So, if Daniel and I are on a project together, it's a zero-sum game. For me to win, he must lose, and vice versa. And all too often, our projects are set up that way. I heard a saying when I got into the industry a long time ago, no comments, that, we come together on projects as strangers and we leave as enemies, right? This whole stranger approach has not served us well, which is really how IPD came about. Because there's been a realization for years, we need to collaborate more. So we love IPD, but our contention with IPD is it's great, but it's not going far enough. That it's a step in the right direction. It's directionally correct, but it's not the destination. So with the idea of a neighborhood, you create an IPD construct, but it goes much deeper into the supply chain, encapsulating many, many companies, tens or hundreds eventually, perhaps. But it also is a much longer term view. And so can we act less like strangers and more as neighbors, where we have an individual identity, but we also have a shared purpose? Smart contracts and blockchain at the bottom are the foundation, the technology underpinnings that make that create the environment for trust and transparency that's necessary for this type of model to really work and thrive. And then supplier engagement is flattening the supply chain, engaging the innovations in the supply chain earlier into the project process so they can deliver value at the right place at the right time and not just be relegated to a 3 bid and a buy procurement process somewhere later on in the project. And then finally, I mentioned dynamic risk modeling, one of the most fascinating and rapidly developing areas of the research, because let's face it, projects really at the end of the day are ultimately a giant risk management problem. And the work happening here is really cool. Let's talk a little bit about the neighborhood here. So the idea of the neighborhood is that it is very IPD-ish, but the construct of the neighborhood is that you have many of many in it. And what I mean by that, you can have many electrical subcontractors, many suppliers of pipe, many suppliers of steel, many contractors, many engineers. And it's really in an environment that the business schools tend to call an environment of co-opetition, where you can be a complementer and a competitor simultaneously. So you'll find in the first neighborhood, I'll share with you some of those companies in a moment, many of the companies in the neighborhood are competitors, yet they're collaborating in this neighborhood environment to deliver something bigger than themselves. The neighborhood is about a long-term view of joint success for everyone in the neighborhood. There may be multiple neighborhoods that form, likely will, in fact, almost definitely will. Over time, they might form around a certain building sector, maybe a particular owner or developer or type of project. Maybe they'll form regionally. We're not sure yet, because the very first one's gotten underway now, and that's the only one that exists so far. But there's interest in others that are to come forward. And there could even be sub-neighborhoods where you might have sub-supplier neighborhoods and so on. But this is a kind of a concept right now that we're starting to put some meat on the bone. This is a group of companies that is the first commercial sector OS2 neighborhood. This is fresh. It just started in about November of last year, so it's kind of hot off the press. Started with our conversations with a couple of the organizations on here that had been following OS2, really liked the ideas coming out of OS2, but got impatient and said, we don't want to wait for all the research to be done. Let's go do something now. And so we said, okay, we'll help facilitate that, happy to do it, and formed what's now kind of a living laboratory of companies that's growing every month that are interested in doing a new thing, creating a neighborhood in parallel with the research also progressing to really figure out what is a neighborhood really going to, how is it going to operate? What are the bylaws? How do you govern it? So we're working on all of that now with the research, but these are the companies that have stood up and said, I'm in, I want to go work on this and help develop something jointly together. I'll point out a couple things that are of interest. There's a major owner or developer on here. So the neighborhood isn't just about the supply chain that delivers assets, it's actually about the asset developers too. There's also, as I mentioned earlier, competitors of each other, competitors that build the same types of projects. There's also a diverse group of industry representation, from technology firms to contractors to sub-trades to engineers, even to an insurance company, right? We need all of the participants to the project process at the end of the day. This is just a start. I mean, over time, this neighborhood could have hundreds and hundreds of companies in it. And other sub-neighborhoods will spin up too. There's already one of these companies on here talking to us about creating their own neighborhood in addition to this one. We expect them to, there's a lot of talk in the oil and gas space now about creating one too, especially with those owner companies I showed you earlier that are funding the research for OS2. So now let's switch gears real quick and talk about blockchain and smart contracts. But before I do, I want to pause for a couple minutes and open it up for any questions. I covered a lot. The neighborhood's a heady topic. I want to see if anyone has some questions first before we get into the next phase of this, which is blockchain. Okay, well, I assume the silence means no questions. I will continue, but if you do have some, raise your hand or holler at me, whatever, and we'll absolutely be happy to answer them. So we'll talk a little bit now how about blockchain is making its way into capital projects and all of the cool things that can be done with blockchain, but where we're starting. So blockchain, we believe, we're no experts in future forecasting and predicting where the world's going to be in 5 or 10 years, but I would venture, and I think Daniel would agree with me since he's involved in this as well, that 5 years from now, blockchain will be as prevalent in our vernacular in the industry as databases and ERPs like SAP and Oracle are today. It is absolutely profound in its ability to basically be a complete game changer for so many things we do. But let's talk about why blockchain. Well, blockchain is really good about facilitating trust and confidence. It essentially is a distributed digital ledger that basically is multiple computers that validate information across those different computers, and therefore it's immutable, which means you can't mess with it, you can't change it. I see Herb's beautiful face on here. Hi, Herb. But if Herb was operating with us in a blockchain environment, basically what that would allow us to do is Herb, either through human error or through malfeasance, could not go in and change information because it would be prevented by the system. So information recorded in the blockchain, therefore, is considered the common shared truth of what the project was at that particular point in time. So it's a very good way of creating a common single source of truth, as we like to say. You hear that a lot in the industry. Blockchain's the way to achieve that across all of the transactional information, or however you decide to apply it. Greatly reduces transactional waste, which is back to our 40% that we talked about earlier. That's a major goal of OS2. Mitigates the risk of fraud and increases data reliability. Many of you have worked on projects. Most of you, that's the industry you're in. You know, projects today still have, you know, we're plagued with so many different databases and so many systems. There's owner systems, engineer systems, contractor systems, subcontractor systems, and they're all independent silos of data. And sometimes we do a good job of trying to kind of collect that and share information. That's called interoperability. But generally speaking, we struggle with that mightily on projects where you'll have the owner's version of the truth, the contractor's version of the truth, and so on, where data is always mismatched. And project controls is really tough because it's hard to really get a handle on where you are exactly on the project at any point in time. So if we were to blockchain the world on a project, it conceptually would look like this. What we have on the left is what we do today. This is the hierarchical supply chain. All those little blue lines are contracts or purchase orders between parties. But if all of those blue lines became smart contracts, that we recorded all of those transactions on the blockchain, it would create this environment that you see on the right, this shared single source of truth, where everyone that has permission could see the same instance of data on the project at the same time from beginning to end. What's interesting about the blockchain is when you record a transaction on a data block and then you record the next one, they link together and they stay connected forever. So you can always have a connected history of everything that's occurred, say on a smart contract recorded on the blockchain. Now, this illustrates how it might actually work in practice. So the smart contract's in the middle of the page. A smart contract essentially is just a digital version of a paper contract. Now, we all have paper contracts or PDF contracts or whatever, but the idea is each one of these in construction has, it's kind of the same elements. It's got commercial terms that conceive, I'm going to provide some goods or services in exchange for money, okay? And so we take a smart contract, what you do is you take the business logic of the commercial terms and you can code that in computer code and set that on the blockchain. And then what's shown with that cloud on the left is just illustrative of various sources of data that we collect on projects. Maybe we have approved time that comes out of an SAP CATS or ADP type system, or maybe we have materials that are received and there's a receiving system or some way to check those materials arrived, or maybe we're using Jovix or IntelliWave to use barcode scanning on those materials, or maybe there's a QA/QC inspector in the field validating that a lump sum contractor's quantities were installed to support their progress billing. I can go on examples of data sources. We have hundreds of them on projects. The idea is the parties agree to what those data sources are and say, instead of creating a paper invoice, we're just going to take that data source, a valid transaction, feed it through an API connection to a smart contract, record it on the blockchain, and start to record in digit. Basically, what you do is you automate the performance of the contract. You no longer have to manually administer the contract. You have an environment where you actually don't have to create an invoice anymore. Imagine that. You actually can auto invoice and auto pay based on the transactions that are executed by the smart contract. This enables the industry now to pay faster. Okay. Now you don't have to pay faster. Again, I'm looking at Herb. Herb might say, you know what? I like to pay in 90 days or 60 days or whatever. You can do whatever you want with a smart contract. It's a computer code. You can hard code in any sort of payment timing you want, but it gives you the ability, and we love this, to pay faster, because the number one source of transactional waste is late payments and the cost of capital. We have got to get a culture change in our industry where, starting with the owner, hopefully, we start to pay faster and faster, and that trickles through the supply chain in a positive way, just like late payments exist today in a negative way. We need to change that. Blockchain's the great leveler from across your system. It doesn't matter whatever home office system you happen to run. Basically, because data goes into the smart contract using standard data schema, it can then feed back to any home office systems you want using those API connections and those same data schemas. So again, multiple parties can collaborate using whatever systems you come to the dance with, and you can still have access to that same information, same time, regardless of what those systems happen to be. This illustrates the faster payment process. What's shown at the top is kind of a 17-step, which it is whatever on different projects. It's kind of the normal manual way of invoicing. We collect the data in the field, we do some verification, it goes through some signatures, it goes into the home office and they tinker with it and create a pro forma invoice. And then it goes to the client, it gets recycled and da, 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 da. So this is where your 30-day payment terms, evolve into 60 or 90 or whatever, because it's so mandrolic. But now some people try to automate parts of this. We have Ariba running on SAP, we have Textura, we have all kinds of systems like that that are generally automating this process. But what they're ultimately doing at the end of the day is they're digitizing still a paper-based thought process and paper-based workflow. Why do you need 5 signatures on the invoice? The whole idea is to completely eliminate the need for all this cross-verification, because you have the power of blockchain at your hands now. So you can basically kill all that stuff and just go to 2 steps: digital verification of the work, auto payment. Again, at any cycle you want. You can pay in net 1 days if you want. So how cool would that be for your suppliers if you have the ability to pay them quicker? Maybe they'll offer you early pay discounts or whatever, who knows? There's many benefits for the payers and the payees. This lists some of them. One of the big benefits here is a high level of accuracy in the payment process. So using this technology, you can avoid the situation where you pay for things twice inadvertently, or maybe you pay for things you never received. For the contractor side or the service provider side, you pay for everything you're entitled to, right? That's also a problem, is sometimes contractors or engineers leave work on the table because they, especially when change management occurs, don't always capture that in their invoicing process. Absolutely minimizes the opportunity for disputes, at least financially related ones. I mean, you might still fight over an environmental spill or something of that nature that may not be financially related, but when it comes to execution of the contract, there's way fewer opportunities to fight over anything when you're using the blockchain. So these are some use cases that are underway in the industry now. I'll give you a couple examples just to whet your appetite. I won't go through all of them, but one is an example. Number one is a nationwide mechanical contractor. They have offices all around the United States. They do about 800-900 million a year in revenue. And they buy a lot of construction materials from big supply houses. And this particular one is they do millions of dollars a year with this particular supply house. And it's involving thousands of invoices, like literally thousands, where everything from on one project, the superintendent runs down to the corner depot and buys one part, all the way up to one invoice that has many tens of line items, thousands of dollars, and everything in between. They have a national price agreement. They have multiple regional price agreements. And this is automating that whole process for them to completely eliminate that, all the manual work involved in that whole invoicing process, both for them and for the supply house. Now imagine the impact on the business: cut down on indirects, back office services, cut back on overhead, cut back on accounts payable, accounts receivable, even audit. Blockchain's a self-auditing system. So, the efficiency gains in the business can be quite profound by using this type of technology. And if you layer on that like an early pay discount, well, that's just a bonus. But the efficiency gains, the improvement in, how we operate our businesses is the big gain here. And now in this environment of, there was a presentation earlier on the skilled worker shortage. Well, that applies in the home office too. I mean, project accountants, project controls, engineers, we have a shortage of home office people too. This can help solve for some of that. I'll go down and talk about number 3 real quick. Similar to number 1, but it's buying concrete. Pretty straightforward, but having traceability of concrete batches and admixtures and then tying that to the different unit rate price sheets for the different admixtures, making sure that what was bought was delivered, where it was installed at the site, matching each one of those trucks to the cylinder brakes and the slump tests for that concrete work and so on. And you can kind of go down construction rental equipment, no brainer, number 6. That's a particularly interesting one because the rental equipment companies are very digitized now. They have a lot of sensors on their equipment. So that's beautiful to feed a smart contract. So I want to share with you that some of this stuff is getting underway to show that, hey, OS2 is not just about theory. It's not just about stuff we talked about at the CURT National Conference 2 or 3 years ago, but it's really advanced now quite impressively, and there's real things happening today. So these are near-term do-it-nows. And this neighborhood stuff is a little more longer term. We'll kind of go to that as a destination, but if any of you want to start now with some new technology implementations, this stuff is available if anyone's interested. Couple of use cases in the energy sector. This is with a large oil and gas company, international oil and gas company that's used this technology in drilling operations and in offshore platforms in the Gulf, and just some cost savings from them, just to show that they actually experienced real savings, and they're big fans. They're taking this technology and extrapolating it to different areas of their business worldwide now. How is OS2 going to benefit capital project management? The studies done by CII and us at Prairie Dog and CURT we've done some modeling on this, and the research is really kind of playing this out, which is interesting. These numbers have been around since we started OS2 and did the early modeling, but now that we're really advancing, especially in the area of risk, we think that these are very achievable numbers, that in the not too distant future, we're going to be in an environment where we can have very significant capital cost reduction on projects between 30 and 40%, and at the same time improving speed 2x. Very profound impacts on projects, and simultaneously creating benefits for providers, which are the engineers and the constructors and the suppliers of materials and so forth for projects, more profitability or projects for them to work on. So this really can create a true win-win. I know that's an overly used term, but we really do get that here with OS2 and some of this technology. This shows if we don't do anything, what could occur. So as part of our research, we went back and did a study in 2018, so it's a couple years old, and we looked back at a whole host of projects that were collected back from the 1980s and 90s, well over 100. I think it was close to 200. They were all normalized to a $100 million baseline, and that's that little gray bar at 1998, which illustrates the average of all of those capital projects normalized to $100 million. We then adjusted for inflation using actual inflation data that occurred in the industry over the 20 years from 1998 to 2018. Inflation during that time in the United States was 54% over that 20-year period. However, capital construction costs increased 122% over the same period of time. In other words, we're getting worse faster than the overall economy is getting worse, at least from a cost escalation standpoint. We then said, okay, what if we don't do anything different? What if we allow cost escalation to continue the way it's been going? What could happen? And we curve fit all of the escalation curves, and this was for labor, materials, and raw material like copper, steel, concrete, engineering. So all the indirects and directs, and extrapolated and forecasted out 20 years from now, if we don't do anything, where might we end up, okay? And that's the red bar on the right. So the point here is that where cost is escalating in the industry at an increasing rate, it's actually accelerating versus what it was the prior 20 years. Now, what's the point of all of this? Well, if we had OS2 in place now, we can maybe mute the effects of this and be on a lower cost escalation trajectory is the point. Because I'll go back to the earlier statement on the Dow Jones and the financial performance. We have got to change what we're doing. This is not about incremental tweaks to the system. What we're doing is good, especially the work with BIM and modeling. All of that's great, but it's incremental insofar as moving the aggregated needle in capital projects globally. And we need it more than ever now because we have a lot to do in the built environment. We have infrastructure we need to either rehabilitate here in the US, in North America generally, or new infrastructure to build out around the world and so forth. So we've got to change. And we believe OS2 certainly is directionally correct for our industry. And I'm going to end here in a few moments and just kind of leave you with a couple of final thoughts. I want to contrast where we are today with where we believe the world will be tomorrow, kind of a future look. Today, taking our economy from, say, paper-based to digital-based. And I'll use a term here. I'm going to draw a distinction between digitalization and digitization. Okay. Today, we do a lot of digitization. Now, digitizing is basically where you take your current process and apply technology to it. This is an example of, now automatically routing the invoice for the 5 signatures that you used to require, handwritten signatures on. That's digitizing. Digitalization, as in contrast, is where you completely scrap the old process and you replace it with a brand new one that's enabled by the power of technology, new technology, that previously you couldn't even envision the ability of anything to change that. It's kind of the transition from, say, the typewriter to the computer, from the Motorola flip phone to the iPhone. So blockchain will be that profound of an impact for our industry, we believe, and I think others share that as well. But again, going from ERPs or SAP Oracle to back office systems today to shared immutable records, sideload systems, frictionless transactions, and so forth. So we're on the verge of something cool. We really think that this stuff is transformative. Blockchain can do lots of things for us. It can not just automate contracts. It can, automatically manage lien waivers. It can manage all the data you collect on a project related to project controls. You can track, brass alley records for workers that go in and out of the gate, safety training. You can weld logs and weld history. You can track every weld in your plant and see who welded it and when, capture all the data from the weld inspections, et cetera, et cetera. Your mind can kind of go wild where this stuff can eventually go. And with that, I'll leave you with this, and I'll be done and open it up for questions. If you're interested in getting involved in OS2, there's a few ways you can do that. One, you can go ahead and look at doing a pilot of smart contracts and blockchain today in some part of your business, and I showed you a few examples of what others are doing. You can choose to get involved in the neighborhood. You can either join the current one, or you can form your own, grab some companies. We'd be happy to help you with that. Or you can contribute to the actual research to continue advancing this thinking at the University of Texas. That's a tax-deductible donation to the university. And CII has opened up different levels of ability to contribute. Again, this isn't a pitch. You don't have to do anything. Well, my goal was to share with you where we are with OS2, but I often get the question, okay, that's cool. How do we get involved? So I did want to share this with you. With that, I'm done. I'll open it up for questions. I think we have a few minutes left. No questions?
Let me add to, while maybe some folks are thinking of questions, let me add just a bit more color commentary to what Pete's already mentioned. He alluded to this, but we've already initiated this process, as he mentioned, with some other organizations, contractors, and so on in the industry. And so if anyone is interested in doing something like this, we're ready to go. And we're happy to work with you and figure out exactly what the needs are and get it started. As was noted, you can start this process without really taking much risk at all. In fact, virtually zero risk, other than, frankly, a minimal amount of money just to deal with the cost of doing the coding and those types of things. And so you could run in parallel a smart contract, let's say, for placing concrete, and at the same time do that in the way you typically would do it, and then begin to realize that value right in front of your eyes in real time. And once you do that with, say, just two parties, then you can and see what that is. Then you can begin the real value opportunity, which is when it becomes multiple parties. So I just wanted to say, if a lot of this sounds, hey, that's all pretty new stuff, I don't really know, and maybe scratching your head a little bit, that's understandable. As Pete mentioned, blockchain is fairly new, but it's moving very, very rapidly, and there's just great opportunity here. And we're ready to work with you if you want to do some stuff with us. So it's pretty cool stuff with an incredibly minimal amount of risk, if any at all.
Hey, Pete, this is Jessica Kelly. Having been involved with the major ERP implementation, I understand the challenges of, we'll just integrate two systems. And I am incredibly new to blockchain, so very much a novice. Can you speak a little bit to what it takes to actually connect and get an SAP to talk to a Oracle to talk to, an Intuit?
API.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually fairly simple. The good news is it's fairly simple. This layers on top of those existing systems. You don't replace them. We say we don't rip and replace. You don't replace those. Basically, since the data flowing into the smart contracts is using a standard data schema, that's an API connection to the smart contract that's recorded on the blockchain. That data is sitting in the blockchain using that standard data schema that you recorded it. And so that's all that's just fancy speak for, I agree on use a consistent format. So like maybe I'm always going to use feet, like the versus meters, or I'm going to always use, represent dates a certain way or whatever. And whenever that data is in the blockchain, you can then say, okay, I want to take some of that back into my home office system. I might not take all, or maybe I take all. And I want to connect that back to my SAP or Oracle ERP. Maybe I want to bring it into a project management system like Procore. Maybe I have, like a progress measurement system or a scheduling type system. Whatever those systems are, those are just API links back into those home office systems. For some of the blockchain platforms, those are already built.
Yeah, we can work with you to help make all that happen in a pretty seamless way. In this process, and as part of doing this, we've developed a process for that. So.
And to do one of these, it's like usually about 2 to 3 months. So it's not a lot of time to do your first one.
And I'm guessing once you do it, then it's done indefinitely unless you add more data elements.
Well, yeah, you're right. If you do one like a smart contract for, say, I'll go on the example buying concrete, and you have one, you can use it over and over again for the next time you buy concrete. Or maybe you're buying, electrical subcontract services, or maybe you're buying other kinds of construction materials or consumables for your office. It doesn't matter. It's a replicatable computer code.
That's right.
Rinse and repeat.
Great, thank you, Jessica. Any other questions or comments? We will have more on this as these developments unfold, as they say, at the touch points along the way. Perhaps, most certainly, you'll hear from it by November, maybe even in the CII CURT conference in August. So great job, Pete. I know for a fact that Pete and Daniel have worked exceedingly hard, along with others that are on that leadership team, to get to where they are. And we believe it's going to be a terrific breakthrough for the industry when this evolves and is certainly deployed and picked up by others as we go along. Thanks so much, Pete. Thanks.
Thank you all. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, you bet. 100%. We are now in our home stretch, as they say. It's 3 o'clock straight up. We have until 4. We'll probably end a few minutes early and do a little recap. But our next presentation is with two long-term friends of the CURT organization, Anne-Marie Thornquist, who's a lean specialist at Jacobs, and James Goff, who is the vice president of advanced facilities at Jacobs. And they're going to talk about the internal lean leadership. What makes it work? What do they do? How do they do what they do? And how do we implement lean into projects more effectively? And you might also understand that I've been referring to the Dropbox. Around this office, we put new things in the Dropbox all the time. I'm wrong. Palmer smacked my hand. It's in your event app. is in your event app. So these kind of presentations that you saw from Pete and about to see from Anne Marie and James, they're not in a Dropbox that only exists here. They're in your event app. And so Palmer wanted me to correct myself, and I do apologize. So again, Anne Marie, always good to see you. And we're going to kick off with you and James. Take it away. It's all yours, gang.
Thanks, Greg. It's always good to be back with all of our CURT friends as well. Jim and I are going to talk about internal lean leadership and, you know, what's the path and why would you do this? What drives it? So there's Jim, VP, and there's me. I was going to get a picture of Gwyneth Paltrow and just put that in there, but they said no, they really wanted me. So you've got that. But what we're going to talk about is first, I always start with a lean overview. And Jim's going to talk about the start of the lean journey and all the drivers that led to why we need internal lean leadership. And then I want to talk about what are the challenges that brings to you, the advantages, and what does that mean for all of our friends that are consultants and coaches. But first, of course, we do the quick advertisement. Jim, you want to do the Jacobs at a glance here?
Sure. Quick update for those of you that aren't familiar. We were founded in 1947 by Dr. Joe Jacobs. Our headquarters is now in Dallas, Texas. That was a move from California a few years back when we had some leadership change at the CEO level. We're about 55,000 employees around the world right now, 400 plus offices, and annual revenue about 13 billion. And we have a Jacobs Value Plus program where we track throughout the year savings ideas that are approved by our clients. And last year's count was 2.5 billion in client savings. So we've dabbled in lean and look forward to talking to you more about it today. Here's a shot of the 16 life sciences offices. This is the group that Anne Marie and I really support for the most part. Obviously, with it being offices elsewhere, there's other touch points, but this is really the critical mass for life sciences, with Cincinnati, Ohio, Conshohocken, PA, and Raleigh, North Carolina kind of being our lead hubs, if you will. So our values: to create a more connected, sustainable world. We do things right, we challenge the accepted, we aim higher, and we live inclusion. And lean is obviously a huge part of doing things right and challenging the accepted.
Thanks, Jim. So I like to always start out with what is lean, because I found that a lot of people have a lot of different definitions of this. And, you know, Pete was just talking about the blockchain and how IPD doesn't quite get us there. Well, we have a lot of people that aren't even quite to IPD yet. So just courtesy of the Lean Construction Institute, lean is not just a bunch of tools. It is a culture of respect and continuous improvement aimed at creating more value and while identifying and eliminating waste. And it's the lean project delivery system is this organized group of principles and tools to allow the team to operate in unison and create flow. What are we trying to do with lean? We're trying to get reliable workflow. We're trying to have more value for the customer and less waste. We're trying to get everybody to look at the whole, not the parts, and to have this continuous improvement that drives everything we do. Benefits: it's safer, it's more effective, the productivity is better, and most people who've been on highly intensive lean projects will count those as their most enjoyable projects because everybody is working together as a team. Again, this is what it's about, and we just wanted to give that, to put everybody on the same playing field. So starting the lean journey. This is Jim's journey within Jacobs that brings us to where I am today. So go ahead.
So I see we have Al Schwarzkopf on the call. So a lot of this is going to be reliving Al and I's history together. But I actually started working for Merck on a project, I think in 2009 timeframe. And we did a lot of interesting things at that time, but they were just things that we did as a team. somewhere around, I want to say, probably 2010, we started reading some of the lean manuals and having our kind of lunch and learn sessions. But officially, Al and I hooked up on a couple of projects around the 2012 mark. And one of the first things that we really adopted and that really stuck with me personally was the last planner system. We used it on a project. Actually, Al and I spoke, I think it was in Colorado way back then, talking about the journey we had on that project. And it was interesting. We did it across 3 projects on the same site, and in some cases, some of the same subcontract partners. And I have never learned as much on a project as I did through using the last planner system. What we found out was, you know, the numbers really don't tell the story for me or for the project. You know, 54% PPC is not good, and 100% was worse. I remember one time we were struggling meeting our schedule and could not get the superintendent to give me really anything that I understood as to why we were off. And finally, he was able to just roll out the drawings and sit me down and say, well, look at this. This isn't one 16,000 square foot slab you're asking us to place. The way you've designed it is there's actually 54 sub slabs with different bars going in different directions, and some being greased and some being different types of construction joints. So it was a serious learning process for me. One that convinced me Last Planner was a great tool in our quiver. Due to sticking with that, and quite frankly, sometimes sticking with that in the lean journey without the full endorsement of the business, lean took me to Switzerland. We had a project. I continued to follow Last Planner. It became, you know, from Last Planner light to more formal implementation, and just had great success on the projects that I was doing for Jacobs. And we had a large program in Switzerland and things weren't going well. And so the big boss calls up and says on a Tuesday, how about you take this Last Planner stuff on the road? And I said, sure. So before you knew it, I was in Switzerland for a little over a year. And it was just a key tool that allowed us to organize some of the chaos and really drive the project to completion. Fast forward to what happened during the pandemic. I think we learned on a lot of the projects for Merck and for other clients is we have a lot more waste in the programs than we expected. There was multiple projects that should have been 12 or 18 months in the normal delivery, but in order to try to deliver those vaccines to market, we were finishing them in anywhere between 12 weeks and 6 months. It was really pretty amazing what we were able to do by leveraging the lean tools and eliminating waste. So what does that mean, and how do we get through, you know, to where Anne-Marie is? In the beginning, it was all about me trying to change the way Jacobs, a 55,000 person company, or probably about 5,000 on the life sciences side, did work. We had project to project success. We had consultants. We would hire consultants at times and bring them in and do some spot training. Usually it'd be at the beginning of the project in the honeymoon stage. Everyone's happy. We're committed to doing these things, learning these new ways. But then the reality is the pressure mounts. The project has challenges. And I'd say when the pressure mounts, we go back to where we're comfortable. And that wasn't really sticking with the lean plan from the beginning. And then ultimately what happens, like our performance varied. We had some projects where we were really successful. Those were the ones that stuck to the values and the lean learnings. And then we had some that when the pressure got mounted, went back to the old ways and they were less successful. So we really had no company-wide alignment for quite some time. Next slide, Anne-Marie. So driving change, what does it need to look like? And early in the adaptation, right, it was training. Like I said, early, but it wasn't often, and it wasn't really project specific. So maybe I learned some comment or learned some different tools and I would be able to do some teaching or some training for other projects, but there wasn't the help understanding how to apply it to the specifics of this job. Coaching obviously needs to be beginning, middle, and end. You know, to hire the consultant and have them help you kick off the job, but not help you see it through, and not help you there when the pressure mounts and you want to go back to your old ways. Definitely challenges, you know, real business change. Implementation. So this really needs to become how we do business. I mean, quite frankly, we still are losing opportunities today because there's other firms that have been on this journey longer and have made it part of who they are. So together, Anne Marie and I are working to change that within Jacobs. Update the processes. So I think, you know, early on in my career, there was just so much lean to take in and learn that maybe we were distracted by it all. We wanted to do a little bit of everything rather than really master something. And so I think it's important as we're driving change as our organizations that we really master a piece, an element, and then we move on to the next one. While not letting that one, you know, die on the vine, but staying engaged. And then lastly, for the longest time, trying to drive change as one person in the organization was tiresome, right? It was actually impossible. And so having that help, having someone in Anne Marie's position who can help, you know, be that steady leadership, right? Steady management, steady support, a true champion who stays focused with us is really, I think, what we're talking about here today. So external drivers. We've known for a long time that we needed to do this, but we kind of remained successful even in an industry where clients want things, you know, faster, better, cheaper. Now what we're seeing is all of our greatest fears. You know, what was going to happen when we had the mass retirees leave and we had a new young workforce, or that workforce is unbelievably constrained. Now it seems all of the things we've talked about over the last however many years are converging on us at once. We've got, at least in life sciences, a red hot market. We do not have that experienced workforce anymore. And the last project I did of size, 75% of our workforce had between 1 and 3 years industrial construction experience. And we can no longer solve our problems by throwing more money at it. Money is not going to help anymore. So we got to understand that the industry's changed. And I think you start to see now more and more corporate structures change to kind of map and understand how we need to behave differently. You know, in the old days, we had our business units and the VPs were responsible for everything under their fold, if you will. And that included quality and safety and inclusion. And now what we see is the businesses, and I think corporate structures are realizing that the business unit VPs really can't be the champions of change, can't really improve the business holistically when they're worrying about a 90-day report card. And you have more and more quality director, safety director, inclusion, diversity, and lean directors, specialists, SMEs, reporting directly into the COO of organizations that can help provide the structure and help us as not just one business unit, but as a company change. And so process improvement is not new, and I know this team knows it better than anybody. We haven't really changed and improved a ton, in construction. In fact, you know, the previous presentation talked about it, in fact, getting worse, and maybe will continue to get worse. I think the challenge for us, Jacobs as an organization, to continue to support our clients and to achieve what needs to be done is we have to move that needle. We have to be able to demonstrate that through our lean journey and lean principles and lean understanding, that we're driving productivity up in the construction industry and adding more value in the process. So internal drivers, for me, it's been a long journey. I started in, say, right around 2010, formally 2012 with Al, and we're sitting here today, and Anne Marie and I have had the opportunity to work together, dedicated to Jacobs Lean for the last few months. So, you know, in my opinion, grassroots, right? It's hard. It's not enough. I am in by no means whatsoever a lean expert. I was maybe, you know, a bit of a disciple and somebody who saw the value and tried to make it work for me and my projects, but I couldn't execute my projects and become an expert and help transform our business. I don't think we can look at, you know, lean coaching as just a consultancy that we buy as an add-on or do at the start of a project. It really needs to be something that the corporation is committed to through all levels, right? So that's figuring out how we do everything that Jacobs does better. And ultimately, it's getting back to where I think we were when I first started with Jacobs. We used to be very prideful about being a learning organization and wanting to learn from our mistakes and improve. And I think it's really important to have the commitment from the business and full-time experts in-house in order for it to become part of who we are, not just what we do on select opportunities. So my messaging for the companies out there and anybody considering to hire that internal SME is you got to do it. And it can't just be, you know, putting a consultant on retainer. The person needs to be at the right position in the organization with the right amount of responsibility, reporting into high level leadership, whether it be a VP or director level position. That's key. Absolutely has to have a growth strategy for lean integration that matches our corporate vision. You know, we talked about it earlier. We want to build a sustainable world. We want to do a lot of things. We're not going to be able to do that if we continue to produce waste throughout our part of a project delivery. And it's definitely represents some depth of transformation for the organization. We Jacobs have done a lot of transforming since about 2016 with our new CEO, and we understand and have a lot more expectations upon us as a business to move on this transformation journey and evolve as a company. So I think those are kind of the key messages and why it's been such a great move for us to pick up Anne Marie.
Thanks, Jim. So I want to talk to you about what you can expect. And if you do bring someone in, what are the challenges they're going to face? One of the big challenges is that some people are going to see this person as the savior. You know, you're going to bring someone in and you're going to have people in your organization that are going to expect the lean leader to solve problems that have been around forever. They're going to expect this person to immediately take down all of the silos between the different departments and to solve process issues that have been there for years. Some people will see the lean leader as somebody that's going to work directly on their project. They're going to take over scheduling or reporting or whatever. And the lean leader is not there to work on a specific project. Sure, they'll pitch in, they'll help, but that's not their role. There are some people that are going to be really excited because now there's a lean leader and I've been doing lean and this person is going to come in and see how great I am and they're going to fast track me for promotion or glory. They're going to be able to highlight me. Fortunately, there are some people that are going to be really excited because they want to learn more, and there are going to be some people who are going to be really relieved because they've been trying to do this. They feel like they've been pounding their head against the wall, and now there's somebody else who's going to help. So there's the savior. But then there are going to be people who think your lean leader is the devil. Of course, there's resistance from those people who dislike change. There are a lot of people who have really invested. You know, they were part of the people that came up with the processes that we currently have. We're already good. Who is this person that's coming in that's saying that I can do my job better? I've been doing it this way for years. It works. Interestingly, there are going to be some individual people out there who've really been pushing this, and all of a sudden they say, you know, I've been trying to make this happen for 3 years. Now you bring in this person who's going to be way up high. So they're going to be kind of resentful. And then of course, there's always the distrust. There are a lot of people who, you know, they were on a project that tried to implement lean and it wasn't done correctly. It wasn't done with the right support it needed. It fell apart because they started it and they didn't finish it. So there's going to be a lot of distrust from those people. So you need to be aware that bringing not just a new person, but a new role into the organization and a new person in that role, there's going to be a lot that they're going to have to deal with from a personnel standpoint to make sure that they can get their job done. And you, as leaders in your organization, are going to need to be supportive of them, of this lean leader, because without that support from a very high level, the lean leader will fail. They need to have somebody who is standing next to them and saying, yep, what this person says is what we want to do. And the thing is having this internal lean leader is a great advantage if you are in that space, if you're ready to make that commitment. Because when you have somebody internally working on the lean implementation and growing your company's lean journey, what they're able to do is work with the corporate leaders to understanding the vision and strategy that's currently in place and building on it. So if your organization is already looking at continuous improvement, if they're invested in being sustainable and being forward thinking, you can meld that with your lean implementation, and you can integrate lean into your ongoing processes. So they'll work with your safety people to say, let's put lean and safety together. Work with your quality people to say, how can lean and quality work together? To better integrate all of these different departments and initiatives to bring lean about in so that it is not just an add-on to every project. It's just not just another thing we do, but it is now part of the way we do business. What your lean leader is going to do, they're going to start setting some standards for lean implementation. What is the expectation? And I would caution a lot of people, don't expect them to implement every lean process right away. You need to understand what teams can do this, what teams are ready to make that jump, and some teams will move faster than others. So you're going to set those standards of where you want to get to and in what time frame you're going to get to. But one of the great things is you have now provided a subject matter expert that all employees have access to all the time. That lean coach, they're great. They are wonderful to have on the project, but they go away. And knowing that they can pick up the phone and say, I'm doing a kickoff meeting, I'm doing a pull plan, I need some help. I either need help with facilitating, I need help just putting together what I'm trying to do. That's an important thing to let people know that they are being supported in this lean journey. Training and mentoring is another big role for an internal lean leader. Again, you're going to be assessing that lean maturity of the company. And it does vary. I've met people who can really understand Last Planner, but have never heard of the 8 wastes, or who are implementing all sorts of great process strategies, but couldn't do TBD. There's a lot of differences in where people are. So you need to understand that and identify those needs for trainings, coordinate the training so that you're working again with those other groups. Are you going to be rolling out training as something for teams, by department, by region? How are you going to do that? What's best for the organization? And when you have somebody internally, they can start to understand how those different groups work and how to make them more effective in this as you roll out the training. You're going to be growing lean leaders within the organization, because Jim couldn't do it as a party of one, and your lean leader can't make it happen as a party of one. So you're going to be training people and growing people so that there is eventually someone on each project that is a champion. And then you're going to be linking those champions together to give them a community of practice that they can rely on and help each other to grow and to move forward in their lean journey. So there's a big thing, of course, with the project focused strategies. One thing is that your lean leader can work with other lean leaders. So the lean leader for an EPCM company can work with the lean leader for a client organization to coordinate how they want that project to go. And that is it's far easier to do when you have the two lean leaders talking together, saying, how can we help our teams, instead of just the client having someone, or just the architect, just the engineer, just the construction manager. But if these lean leaders are working in concert, it's going to be much better for the project. You can coordinate the project specific requirements into an achievable plan. We should be working with our trade partners as well to help them in their lean journey. Now, your lean leaders, although they're not going to do everything, they are probably going to do some coaching and event facilitation, particularly for kickoffs of large projects and helping them get underway. And then, as I said, identifying those lean champions and providing that support throughout the project. And of course, there's software, and we need to make sure that somebody's looking at that actually understands the implications of what each of these new softwares can do. Because of course, there is one new one coming out. I think every month there's some new company that's got the latest, greatest software that is going to make lean the easiest thing to do. And all of them have good parts to them, and somebody needs to kind of be a clearinghouse to understand all of that. So the one last thing is, if you've hired somebody internally to be your lean leader, do we still need external consultants and coaches? Well, your internal person's available all the time. Your coach, they're available project by project, prescribed hours. Your internal person can fit the corporate training to the corporate culture. Your external coach will do training, and I've had occasions where that has not always meshed exactly what the company needs, because even though the consultants tailor their training to what they've been told, sometimes that still doesn't come through the way you need it to, because that lean leader has that real knowledge of what's going on within the company. But yes, we still do need consultants and coaches, because again, no one person can do it all. And if you don't have those internal lean champions and you've got a large organization, sometimes you're going to need to supplement. You're going to need to bring those people in to assist with training or with coaching of a specific project. And remember that if you've got an IFOA, generally you should have a designated coach that is unrelated to the signatory firms that can help drive you to where you need to be, particularly when you're looking at the transparency of establishing your target value cost model. So these consultants, they have specialized knowledge and they bring fresh ideas. They're still very viable, but it is important for companies that are going forward and really want to adopt this to make sure that they have somebody inside, and hopefully we've given you the information you need to be able to make that decision. Questions?
Yes, I have a ton of them, but I'm going to open it to the audience for a minute. A very good presentation, Jim and Anne Marie, as always, and as expected. Any questions from the audience you might have? I'm going to defer to you folks first. So here's a question to get things started here. What are the clash points when you're trying to do lean? So there's Jim and Anne Marie. You mentioned those resistant to change and those who fight against it. And we've been here before, and the eye rollers. Are there other clash points that you've experienced that may have been somewhat surprising to you?
You want me to go first, Anne Marie?
Go ahead, go first, Jim.
So I've lived through it a little bit longer, specific to Jacobs. You know, I think all companies that are participating in this group are pretty prideful. They're really good at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you the number of times that I've heard, "Oh, we invented that," right? We did that 20 years ago. And it's funny because we may have modularized something 20 years ago, and it might have helped the project success. And is that, you know, taking work off site and a lean kind of tool in the quiver? Absolutely. But are we a lean company? Doing lean things every now and then does not make us lean. And I think that's where we are in today's market. You know, it is a hot market, and owners have choices. And I've seen over my career, other firms have adopted it, made it who they are, part of actually how they do business, how they make decisions, how they think about opportunities, and how to deliver projects that maybe weren't my competitor 20 years ago, but they sure are today. And so it's a little bit saddening when I look back at it to say that, you know, we had insight 10, 12 years ago to really buy in, but we're also a very different company then. And we had a lot more of those that said, "I've done it, I invented it, you know, we do it, that's who we are." And now we're a much different Jacobs than we were those years ago. And the leadership that we have now understands the importance of, it's not okay just to say we've done it. It really needs to become who we are and how we do this.
So how big should the team be? So Jim, you were the fighting knight on the white horse. Here comes Anne Marie, and she's obviously highly regarded at CURT and other organizations, but you got 55,000 people. How large does the organization, the implementing organization, need to be in order to effectuate change that leads to that tipping point? Have you done some assessments on that? What are the, besides you folks who herald the change, who are the next most important, maybe that's important's not the word, everybody's important, right? But the next most critical leaders in the team, on the team?
So I think that's a really good question. And right now our focus is on 5 of the 55,000. That's our global life sciences business. And when you kind of start breaking that down, in addition to me and Anne Marie, we probably have somewhere around 6 or 8, you know, business unit market sector leaders that we need to get thinking the way we think, and some of them already do. But I think this is something that Anne Marie and I were discussing with respect to training the organization and rolling it out. I think we'd be foolish to expect, if we had, you know, the 6 or 8 other VPs in the business thinking the same way Anne Marie and I do, that we would have success. I think it needs to be, and when we launched it out, Anne Marie, share more. We need to talk to all 5,000. We really need to get everyone in the organization to understand what lean is about, and that we're going on a journey and we want them to help us, because I think our most influential group is probably going to be the folks that are doing the majority of the work, right? The folks that was myself supporting Al 15, 18 years ago running projects. That's the group that I think once we start connecting with those, Anne Marie, I don't know what your thoughts are, we'll get some really special critical mass and some things happening.
So to add on to that, yes, it's a twofold approach. You've got to get the senior leadership on board. You got to get them to understand that this is where we're going and what we're doing. But you also have some people out there that are kind of in that grassroots area. And I have a group that is my ad hoc advisory group on here we're going with training. What do people know? What are you hearing? So you want to have some people that are in the trenches, that especially those who've really already embraced it, you know, that might be a little bit feeling usurped. Get those people on board because they can really make a difference. And so you're going to need to have, maybe not on every project, one person that's job is nothing but lean, but you're going to have on most of your projects somebody that is driving the change. Because one of the problems that I've seen in the past, this is not at Jacobs, this is in other organizations, is that you have a team, they work together, they use these lean processes and concepts, it goes wonderfully, they disperse to different teams and they don't do it again. So you need to make sure that there's somebody on each team that is pushing to make sure that these things happen.
Is there such a thing as a lean dream team in an organization that prevents that dispersion or that flash in the pan, the 90-day wonders, as we call them around here from time to time? People who are rah, rah, rah about a project, and 3 or 4 months later, it's like, where'd they go? What are they doing? Is there a lean dream team?
You know, the whole idea of this is that you don't have just a dream team, that you end up with a whole lot of people that understand the concept, understand where you're going, and that they start to, you know, they infect each other. You know, we've had this COVID where it gets transmitted and transmitted. Well, we're going to try to do that in a very positive way with lean, and you give everybody a basis, but then you have some people that are going to help really take each team to the next level.
I see. It makes a much better sense. Are there any other questions? Let me pause. I've got several more. Bill, go right ahead, sir.
I did have a question. You know, when you talk about the lean transition and you know, Jim, you mentioned last planner earlier, and I've had a little dab into that, and we had very good success. But like you said, as a team dispersed, you know, we lost that success. And do you have benchmarks or is there information that you can share with owners that drives that says, you know, if we use this lean system, we should see, example, last planner, we should see a 12 to 15% improvement in productivity, or is there a lot of data that you can share to help us in the engineering organization sell it to the businesses?
I'll take that one, Jim.
Okay.
The Lean Construction Institute worked with Dodge Analytics a few years ago and did a study of projects with high lean intensity versus projects with low lean intensity or no lean intensity. And the results do show that you have better project outcomes, more likely to be on schedule, definitely more likely to be on or under budget. So if you reach out to, you can reach out to me, and I can help you link up with people. But yes, LCI does have that information.
Well, actually, I believe CURT also has it because the CURT partnered with that same study.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So Bill, see either Al or Rana on that. So here's another question, gang. Bill, did you have a follow-up, please?
No, that was pretty much answered.
Okay, good. You know, everybody knows Last Planner. God bless Greg Howe. He's gone from us now, and I have many fond memories of being with him and talking with passion about these things. But, you know, I think sometimes it's a little disjointed. What other products should Lean have in its toolbox in addition to the Last Planner tool? Last Planner is a tool. The CLMA, for example, is a tool. The Safety Benchmarking Portal is a tool. What other tools are in the doctor's bag there, gang?
Okay, so I do have, in other presentations, I have lists of them, and there are many. And some things are listed as lean tools that you, some people may or may not think of that way because they've taken on a life of their own, like BIM, prefabrication, modularization.
Right.
But there's all sorts of things like 5S is a big one, which is basically everything, a place for everything and everything in its place, which is very helpful, especially on job sites. Decision matrices, choosing by advantages, other types of decision matrices that I think are really wonderful for helping clients to navigate decisions during design. So there are a host of other things that we should be doing. Last Planner is one that it was easy for people, especially in the construction side, to grab onto that. I've seen a lot of success with Last Planner on the design side as well. So there's reliable commitments and how we make decisions, and, you know, onboarding, good kickoff meetings, conditions of satisfaction, setting value statements for projects. I could go on for a long time, but I won't.
Well, I tell you, I appreciate it. And if you could dig out that presentation, the elements of which you enumerated a few just now, and send it to myself and Rana and Maureen, I'd appreciate it. I think one of the challenges is people want what you and Jim have described. Nobody wants a clunky project delivery system and process and business that has very modest, if not negative results, as you heard Pete shared. Nobody, everyone wants to be a success. Not everybody knows how to lead to that spot. So if you ask anybody in your team, do they want a success? Of course they want a successful project. Do they know how to get you there necessarily? Maybe not. So I think those tools with this, I'd like to do a deeper dive, because I really think that what you folks have at least prompted in my thinking is this is not lean implementation. This is lean deployment. When you implement, it's attached, you come along, you couple yourself, it's an add-on to a project. That project goes and the lean resources fade. When you're talking a deployment, if we're talking a deployment of a military force, you're not only talking about the fighting soldiers, you're talking about the medical care, the transportation, the food, the equipment, the communication system. There's just a whole lot of other things that go into an effective deployment that achieves the mission than just implementing something. And I think for a long time, and we've talked about this in relation to the Alliance, we don't want just an effective implementation, but we want a deployment that, as Jim said, affects the culture, the corporate culture. And I think that's what I really esteem you folks in trying to achieve is lean deployment, so that it becomes a fabric of the culture and not an add-on in your marketing pitch. Like, we do lean, yeah, we got that. What does success look like, and what are the milestones along the way?
Tough question.
Well, the first milestone for me is to have everyone organization be able to say what lean is.
Yes.
And able to identify what are the 8 wastes, and be able to look at things and pick out the waste. That's milestone number 1. What is success? One of the things I caution people is that lean is a journey. You know, I'm learning. I'm learning every day. I'm trying to improve every day. I'm looking at things and saying, what can I do better every day? And so it's hard to say, you know, what is the end point, because we need to be continuously improving.
Yeah.
But the big milestone is to start with people understanding what it is. And the second big milestone for me would be that each person can look and say, I have changed and I am doing something that is different and better and making more value for my client, more value for the next person in line. Sometimes it's not just looking at, is it more value for the client, but if you're a designer, is it easier for the construction person? If you're the construction person, is it easier for the maintenance person? You know, it's that adding value while they eliminate waste.
Yeah, I think for me, success, and Anne Marie and I have talked about this a little bit, when we made a step change with our safety program, starting back in the 2008 timeframe, we started every meeting with a safety moment. It became something we spoke about all the time. So success for me is when we start opening up meetings with a lean moment, when we start having it become part of how we think. And I can't wait for the day, you know, as a project director, or I go visit a project and I have an engineer come up to me and bring up an idea about how they can fix something, and start viewing me as a customer versus the client that they're delivering the engineering set for. So that may be a bit aspirational, but I think we're going to get there.
You know, that's a good point, Jim. And to your journey metaphor, and I believe it is a journey, you know, it caused me to think that if I'm on a hiking trip, one of the rewards of going the distance is around another corner is a new experience, a new site. Maybe we sit down and enjoy refreshment and some there's got to be some reinforcement. What I think discourages a lot of people, I think a lot of people feel like they're on the road from Cincinnati to Columbus. That's the most boring drive ever, up 71, right? Or out I-70 through the plains toward the Rockies. And so it's like, it's just never going to stop already. It's just awful. And I believe people, at the end of the day, we're talking changing and effectuating change in people's behavior. And if that intermittent, the new experience, the new vista, the rest for refreshment, the milestones, I think if they don't experience that, they get weary. Is this ever going to end? We're like little kids in the back seat. When are we going to get there? And we get bored with what we see out the window. And I believe it's not so dissimilar to being on a journey anywhere for change in our industry. Our ecosystem is as Amy said. And I think that means that there is this sounds really philosophical, and maybe that's part of the answer, but there has to be some change in that kind of, yes, we're on a journey. I was on a journey through law school, and I have the same concepts there when I think back, oh my God, when's this going to end? Is I think people do for these things. Maybe they don't have a clear vision of what success is, or it's the same thing. Just a thought about the human part of this journey. Maybe I was rambling and sounding too philosophical. I don't even own a pipe, but
I think that is a great point. On one of the projects that we're just wrapping up now, we were able to do something faster than we ever have, and it was with a lot of lean principles. And what I started doing as a director to keep the engineering team focused and aware of what's going on, I started sharing weekly progress photos.
yes,
Something as simple as that.
a different view.
The engineering team, no one had ever shared with them progress photos on a weekly basis. So while I was maybe excited early in the week about, guys, that we're building this job, whether or not you realize it or not, you know, when we finally started sharing the visuals, we got a lot more alignment on the journey. They understood the ask better when we clued them into the big picture. Otherwise,
right,
we were just pushing out drawings, and they didn't realize what we were doing in the field, and that this is happening and it's happening quickly.
And I think the failure to understand the human predicament in the journey and the human position in the journey sometimes can inhibit the pace of the journey. We just get weary in well doing, and we tend to
Well,
faint.
and one of the things about lean, if you go back to that first slide I had about what is lean, it includes respect for everyone. So what Jim did by sharing that information was a respect for the fact that they are part of the team and they need to share in the successes. And even if that's in the successes of, look, all of you've given us have helped us get this far.
You know, I want to give, thank you, Anne Marie. I want to give honor to Al Schwarzkopf, who's been with our organization for a long time and one of the most stalwart supporters. He has preached the siren song of lean for a long time and has done probably more in the CURT organization to promote awareness and to teach and to inspire than anybody else. We recognized him a while ago as with an outstanding service award to the organization, in part for his work on this subject. And he's on this call and he's sitting there in his office, and I'm sure he would say yay and amen to everything you said. But I just wanted to give a little shout out there to Al. He's inspired, and I've learned so much from him over the years, as well as I have from you, Anne Marie. Al, I know you've turned off your mic. Do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, no, I was. First of all, thank you, Greg. I was not looking for the accolades.
Of course you weren't, but I was looking to give them. Go ahead.
But one of the things, and Jim touched on a key point. Safety has an advantage in the sense that, you know, it's very easy to define when somebody gets hurt and doesn't get hurt. They have definitions that are easy to pick out. You know, everybody knows what an OSHA recordable is. Everybody knows what a lost time injury is, so forth and so on. It's very easy and it's very tangible, for lack of a better term. But when you start talking about concepts of waste and or you know, improvement or being more productive, it's much harder to define. And so all of these things that lean is going after in much the same vein that the safety went after, you've got to find a way to make it visual in the way that you want to do it. So Jim's description of showing the progress pictures on a weekly basis, that's helping to make it visual. You know, when you do last plan or putting it up on the board so people can see the interconnections between the services, that's making it visual. Whether you look at target value delivery, it's showing the budget visually so that people can be able to start to see it. So it's in the same way that safety was going after and making, you know, injuries visible and those types of things visible. Lean is trying to take the same approach in doing it, in that they're trying to make, you know, the process failings visible to the overall process. And you asked about what things are lean. Everything that Pete was talking about in the preceding thing, that was all lean. That's a lean mindset. How do we improve? How do we make the process better for those that are coming after us? You're on mute, Greg.
Well, those like Greg Howell and his team who came before us may be the Lewis and Clark in this. You folks are the troops that really keep the light shining. And I appreciate your efforts. And I'm just intrigued by the process that you're using there at Jacobs. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about it because I think that it has some real elements. To me, it seems like the next portion of lean is what we've all agreed is true. And that's the human element, whether it's a visual for success, whether it's inclusion at all levels of the organization, whether it's changing of the scenery on the journey that's to nowhere and yet to somewhere. I think those things, that people profit connection may be the next aspect to be studied intently with lean deployment. Any final thoughts, Anne Marie or Jim?
Well, I just want to say to bring things full circle with Al, I think the first time I was exposed to lean concepts was at a CURT conference back in the early 2000s.
Yes, I
And-
felt like we were giving Greek lessons. And Joe Gianfrido, I don't know if Joe's on the call, but Al Schwarzkopf and Joe Gianfrido, that was Lewis and Clark at the Kirk team. There he is. Yeah, Joe. Yeah. Thank you, Anne Marie, for that. That's terrific. And that, those were seed planting days. I know that Joe and Al, as I mentioned, they were the Lewis and Clark for Lean for us. And if all we did was inspire wonderful professionals like Jim and Anne Marie to take it further and do more with it, then that was all well worth it. So thanks for that shout out, Anne Marie, and thank you, Joe and Al. Joe, do you have any comment?
No, it was a great presentation.
It
I was
really
just getting
was.
some private notes behind the scenes.
It was a terrific presentation, clear as a bell and inspiring as well. Jim, any
Thanks for all
final
your
comments?
support and glad to see it moving forward the way it is.
Yes, thanks, Joe. Jim, any final parting comments?
Just a big thanks to Al. If he didn't drag me kicking and screaming, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Listen to this, gang. This is what it takes, and this is who we are, and this is what we do. We don't have all the answers. I've got a bag over here, an attaché, and it's got a thimble in it, and I keep it in every briefcase or attaché and computer case that I have, and it's simply to remind me that in the ocean of wisdom, Kurt and myself just have a thimbleful of knowledge and wisdom on it. That's all. But if we come together with our as a collective, and I've said it over and over again, Kurt has three things to share. You've got your experiences, each and every one. You have your resources. Where can we get what you have? Where did you get that ice cream cone? Where did you get that beautiful dress? We have our internal resources, we have our experiences, and then we have our industry perspectives that has been fashioned through the patina of our own journey experience. And that is a powerful threesome, powerful match. Thanks again, gang. So we're going to wind things. Oh, and by the way, Emery, if you can find that follow-up, I'd be very grateful. Are you still in Cincinnati, by the way?
Yes, I am.
Good.
I'm wherever the team needs me to be, but base is in Cincinnati.
Wonderful. Well, I'm vaxxed in 2 weeks out, and maybe you are too. So maybe we can get together and share some more about your marvelous journey. Keep in mind that there is a whole litany of events that are in addition to what you've experienced here. And these events can be found on the event app, the event website that we posted, and Ron and Palmer can post it again. So this is just one fraction of the information exchange that we have set up for you. We have the Safety Summit tomorrow. If you can make it, we'd love to have you sign up. It's not too late. Just reach out to Rana and she'll take care of you and make it as easy as pie. So there again, I want to thank those who are remaining. What we're learning also from Zoom calls, speaking of lean, is I don't think people have time for half-day Zoom meetings anymore. We're going to have to kind of refine the way we deliver content. 12 to 4:30-ish type things are just really, really tough, or else you get a spinning revolving door of people in and out. But it is a discovery process. But for those of you who have remained with us, we thank you. We look forward to seeing you this summer down in hot and humid and miserable Orlando, Florida. Wasn't my site selection, nor was it Palmer's, but that's where we're going to go. And thank you all so much. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.
See ya.